Chapter 553. The little stoic's expression abruptly became exuberant. Her small mouth gaped slightly, and she was momentarily stunned. You can't go back on your word. You nodded yourself just now, and you even nodded 3 times in a row. I counted. Mo Lien's eyes darkened slightly, and his lustrous fingers touched her soft lips. He really wanted to kiss her. A turbulent thought surfaced in his heart, but he forcefully suppressed it. Darling is still young, don't scare her first. It wouldn't be good if he scared her away again. Look. No matter what, we've been together for 7 to 8 years, so we should at least confirm each other's status, right? Prince Mo said as he swayed her small body. Don't be scared, darling. We're just confirming our status, nothing else. He couldn't resist lowering his head and kissing her dazed little face. Soft and sticky, the texture was really good. When you weren't here, I would be filial to my in-laws every 2 to 3 days. They especially like me. Mo Lien suppressed her laughter and said seriously, don't worry, your in-laws definitely won't object to this. Stop. Arbor felt that she increasingly couldn't keep up with the Crown Prince's train of thought. Didn't you say before that we were friends? That we were friends? The words were still ringing in her ears. But didn't you say you didn't have any friends? Mo Lien looked at her seriously and said solemnly, I thought about it. If we don't have any friends, then so be it. We won't be friends anymore. The title of husband and wife is good, what do you think? What else can I say? You're about to betroth me. Don't be fooled by how he kept asking if it was good. In reality, he had already made up his mind. A certain darling was dumbfounded and couldn't come back to her senses for a long time. Mo Lien was laughing uncontrollably on the inside, but she still maintained a serious expression. She reached out to lift the little girl's chin and stroked it. Darling. My suggestion is very good, right? Let's do it like this. Tomorrow, we'll pass down this betrothal decree while we're at it. Okay. Why did she keep feeling like something was off? Arbor blinked and wanted to say something. Prince Mo continued, don't worry, it's just a matter of settling the marriage before your hairpin ceremony, nothing else will be affected. Look at you, you're already so old. Men should get married when they're of age. Don't be afraid of getting married. Be good. But, is it that simple to issue an edict? Arbor asked blankly. Mo Lien smiled and lowered his head. While she was in a daze, he kissed her again. Don't worry, baby. I can handle it. If his father dared to stop him from marrying a wife. That night, Mo Lien went to the imperial study and talked with the great king for more than 2 hours before leaving with the imperial edict. This matter immediately caused the princes and concubines who heard the news to be unable to sit still. They all sent people out to find out what the crown prince and the great king had discussed in secret in the study. Unfortunately, the news was tightly sealed, and no one was able to find anything. After the crown prince went to the imperial study to ask for the imperial edict, Arbor walked around the bedchamber without stopping for a moment. He felt that he had been tricked by someone. What did he mean by it was just a simple title and nothing else? Wasn't it just a title given by the country's heir apparent? Crown Princess. Wasn't the betrothal a bit too hasty? She was an unknown daughter of the small Qiao family. If she suddenly became the crown princess, it would definitely cause a huge uproar in the capital. Arbor reached out to massage her head. She heard the voices of the palace servants. She saw a person dressed in a moon-white casual robe. His features were picturesque as he walked towards her with a smile. In an instant, Arbor felt that all her worries had disappeared. Who cares? Everything will be fine when it comes to it. Today ended. Chapter 554. Early the next morning, when the sky was still just beginning to brighten, a marriage decree was delivered to the Qiao estate, immediately stunning the entire family and even the entire capital. The Qiao family, from the elderly matriarch to the servants, all knelt in front of the main hall to receive the decree. When they heard the edict say, "The Qiao estate's eldest miss has a gentle, refined, and virtuous character, and is specifically designated as the crown prince's consort," some of the maids and servants who didn't know a certain child very well didn't express anything. They just had dumbfounded expressions. But the elderly matriarch couldn't help but twitch her mouth. Who said this? Who exactly was it? Could Xiao Mu, that little girl, be worthy of these 8 words? Gentle character and whatnot, could you stop joking around? At the end of the imperial decree, it even mentioned Xiao Zhongbang and Wei Ziqin. The great king said that the husband and wife had rendered meritorious service in raising the crown princess and specially promoted Xiao Zhongbang to be the Marquis of Jiayuan. His wife, Madame Ne Wei, was conferred the title of a third-rank noble lady and bestowed a marquis estate, jewelry, gems, brocades, food, and so on. The husband and wife looked at each other in bewilderment, unable to make heads or tails of this. On the contrary, second uncle Qiao immediately poked his eldest brother and gave him a look to quickly receive the decree. Old Qiao's eldest son and wife hurriedly kowtowed to express their gratitude and respectfully received the imperial decree. Second uncle Qiao chuckled as he handed the decree-delivering eunuch 5 zhang of cloth, very generous. Nowadays, it was more appropriate to give cloth and food than gold, silver, and gems. Now that Raimi production was about to stop, the price of cloth also rose steadily by the day. The Mo Kingdom capital was still considered good, and its inventory was still abundant. In some of the other fortifications, the commoners' clothes hadn't been changed for several years and could last another 2 years with some mending. The 5 zhang of cloth that second uncle Qiao gave could be exchanged for 3 liters of rice, enough for a normal family to live frugally for half a month. Thus, this was considered a generous reward. The decree-delivering eunuch beamed as he accepted it, his attitude toward the Qiao family much better and his words full of flattery. This residence in the Qiao estate had been gifted to them by the crown prince when they first entered the capital. However, when the crown prince was trying to worm his way into being friends with his parents-in-law, he had never revealed his identity to them, so the couple was still in the dark. After receiving the edict, everyone in the Qiao estate hurriedly packed their things and brought their family members, young and old, to move to the Marquis of Jiayuan's estate. The Marquis of Jiayuan's estate was located on Minshan Avenue in the Mo Kingdom capital. Just its scale alone was extremely grand, with several courtyards inside. Just the gardens alone were divided into 5 or 6 sizes, with pavilions, terraces, and pavilions. The scenery was superb. Everyone naturally left the largest Nanju garden to the crown princess, while the others chose their own courtyards to stay in. The Qiao family had very few people. After the entire family moved in, more than half of the Marquis's estate would be empty. In recent years, old Madame Dowager had not been able to do as she wished. After moving into Longevity Court, she hurriedly went to rest. Only Wei Ziqin was left to take care of the household matters, such as arranging the servants and counting the gifts bestowed by the emperor. An hour later, the news of the crown princess's betrothal had already spread throughout the entire capital. When Queen Zhao heard that the great king had appointed her precious son to such a baffling family, how could she sit still? She immediately brought along her personal nanny and hurried to the great king's royal study. At this time, the entire Mo Kingdom capital had already exploded into a pot of congee. From the princes, dukes, marquis, and ministers to the commoners picking up rubbish, everyone was talking about, "Did you hear? The great king decreed His Highness the Crown Prince's betrothal." Chapter 555. The Crown Princess had never seen her in person and had only heard of her name. She had never appeared in front of anyone, but she had already become a hot topic both inside and outside northernmost court. Talisman patrician family Mu Qianqian flew into a rage inside her room and smashed everything that could be smashed into smithereens. When Madame Mu entered and saw the mess on the floor, her brows twitched, and her heart ached immensely. The current situation wasn't good, so food had to be exchanged for things that were smashed. The family's stockpile of food wasn't enough for her daughter to squander like this. Thus, every item that was smashed was one less item. If this continued, this Miss Mu's boudoir would soon become empty. Alright, what's the use of throwing a tantrum? Madame Mu grumpily said, you're just making a fool of yourself in front of the second and third branches by making a scene here. Who dares to make fun of me? Mu Qianqian's long, shapely brows shot up, and her hatred was hard to conceal. What Marquis of Jiayuan's estate? I've never heard of it before. I don't know where this little bitch came from, but she stole a man's soul in an instant. She really is a shameless bitch. Yo! Look at what eldest miss is saying. She is the crown princess that the great king has officially betrothed. It's fine if eldest miss says this at home. But if this gets out, there's no doubt that our Mu family isn't strict in our upbringing, teaching a young lady to speak filthy words. It's fine if eldest miss is shameless, but don't drag so many unmarried young ladies in the estate down with you. A middle-aged woman in a luxurious gown chuckled as she walked in, followed by a young girl of similar age to Mu Qianqian, who was covering her mouth as she chuckled. When Madame Mu saw this woman, she immediately flared up in anger and bellowed at the maidservants, "Are you all dead? Don't you know how to announce the arrival of the second branches, madam? Hey, eldest sister-in-law, don't randomly blame the servants. We did announce her arrival. It's just that the sound of eldest miss throwing a tantrum and smashing things was drowned out by the sound of the announcement. Don't say that we, the mother and daughter of the second branch, are rude." Madame Mu looked at her sister-in-law's sarcastic words and was so jealous that her stomach hurt. She waved her hand impatiently and said, all right, Madame Lu, who doesn't know that you came here today to laugh at our first branch? Now that you're done, you can leave. This madam won't be seeing you off. Hey, look at what sister-in-law is saying. I'm not here to laugh at you. The second branch's Madame Lu, chuckled as she pulled her daughter, Mu Zhilan, over. I just wanted to tell sister-in-law. Tomorrow, Her Majesty the Queen will hold a banquet and invite the 3 dukes and 5 marquises. Oh no, my mouth really doesn't know how to talk. Madame Lu giggled and lightly patted her own mouth. It should be the 6 marquises' residences now. The 3 dukes and 6 marquises young ladies from the various aristocratic families will all be attending the banquet. Our family's eldest young miss is naturally unwilling to pass on this responsibility, but we can't do anything about eldest young miss' bad mood. For fear of ruining the entire banquet, sister-in-law, I volunteered to mention it to the family head. The family head agreed to let our Zhilan attend the banquet in eldest young miss's place tomorrow. I'm really sorry, eldest sister. Mu Zhilan chuckled softly. All of a sudden, Mu Qianqian couldn't suppress the fury that shot out from the bottom of her heart. A bright yellow talisman flew over and directly smashed towards Mu Zhilan. Bitch, you're all bitches. Mu Zhilan's eyes narrowed slightly. She wasn't someone to be trifled with either. With a flick of her finger, a talisman also flew out. The 2 talismans collided in midair and split apart. Chapter 556. Arbor didn't know what kind of ruckus the entire Mo Kingdom capital was in right now. She slept soundly until the sun was high in the sky. When she opened her eyes, she discovered that it was almost noon. The crown prince was grinning as he propped up his chin and sat by the bed, gazing at her. When their eyes met, Arbor immediately shrunk her head into the brocade quilt wrapped in a cocoon. What was going on? That guy's slightly raised phoenix eyes looked very alluring. Once she accidentally touched them, she felt like her heart skipped a beat. It was very baffling. She shrunk into the quilt and calmly reached out to check her pulse. It was quite normal. Her body was very healthy. Suddenly, the quilt was lifted into the air. The little fellow, who was wrapped in the quilt, hastily poked her head out. What are you doing? Get up, change clothes, and eat something. We still have to rush back to your maternal home. If we don't leave now, we won't even make it for lunch. In any case, we have to go back and have a reunion dinner. Reunion dinner again. The little fellow unhappily pursed her lips. Don't you have to go to the southern study to handle matters today? It's done. The Crown Prince beamed as he took out a clean and moist handkerchief to wipe the little fellow's face. How efficient am I? If we finish things early, we can stay at your maternal home for a whole day today. Xiao Yao, who was holding clothes at the side, pursed her lips and smiled. I'll do it myself, I'll do it myself. Arbor reached out to take the clothes, but the Crown Prince avoided her hand and insisted on letting her wear them. Today, she changed into a light yellow robe with large sleeves, embellishing the little one with pink and tender skin. She then draped an extremely rare moon-white ice mink overcoat over it. The furry collar framed her ordinary little face until it was moist and rosy. After Xiao Yao finished braiding her hair and pasting on the beaded flowers, the little fellow sat in front of the dressing mirror and took out some medicinal powder to rub on her face. The Crown Prince raised a brow and looked at her with a grin. This little thing was finally willing to reveal its true appearance. As our dear Xiao Mu fiddled with her small face, she was still unconvinced. Let me ask you, how did you, Duan Yu, and Situ Yi recognize me at a glance? Mo Lien said with a smile, Duan Yu and Situ Yi, those two fellows, definitely got it right by chance. Of course it's because of you. Prince said as he walked behind her. Jojo's every frown and smile is engraved in the depths of my heart. Even if I'm blindfolded, I can still see. Mo Lien was stunned. She paused for a moment before saying, I recognized you. The little fellow turned her head to look at him. That little face without any makeup overlapped with the one in his memory. No, she was even more beautiful than he had imagined her to be when she grew up. Xiao Yao also widened her eyes and said excitedly, Little miss, you've become prettier. That's right, that's why I said, how could such a beautiful and adorable young lady be so ordinary when she grew up? I didn't dare to say anything these past 2 days. She was afraid of touching on Mrs. Sore Spot. She originally thought that a good-looking young lady would become ordinary when she grew up. Arbor looked at her speechlessly. The Crown Prince couldn't help but laugh, and he reached out to lead the little girl to his side. Let's go, we'll take a carriage over. Oh right. You might not know yet. Your father has been conferred the title of Marquis of Jiayuan. The entire Qiao family has moved to the Marquis of Jiayuan's estate on Minshan Avenue, right next to Minister Song's residence. Chapter 557. Needless to say, those who lived on Minshan Avenue were definitely influential families. The Marquis' estate's neighbors were probably all high officials of the court, so the entire estate's class was immediately raised by quite a bit. The Crown Prince's carriage left the Eastern Palace and unimpeded through the northernmost Huabei Gate. After passing through Anshuan Avenue, which was located in the central axis, they would arrive at Minshan Avenue after turning a corner. It could be seen that Minshan Avenue's location was extremely good. The carriages of high officials and nobles came and went, and very few commoners dared to set up stalls and cause trouble here. The Crown Prince was traveling in a low-key manner this time and didn't bring many people with him. There were only 20 royal guardsmen escorted by He Tian. He Tian had already been promoted from a lowly centurion to the deputy commander of the royal guard as an exception. Of course, this was also due to the Crown Prince's trust. It was said that his father, He Qizhen, would also be promoted this year. As long as nothing strange happened, the position of Minister of Works was basically within his grasp. Just as Arbor was nervously following a certain Crown Prince back to the Marquis of Jiayuan's estate, a shabby donkey cart appeared at the Mo Kingdom capital's western city gate. It pulled 6 or 7 weary-looking people to the very end of the line to enter the city. A family of 3 followed behind the donkey cart. Their clothes were ragged, and they were so emaciated that they almost didn't look human. Because a level 4 zombie had appeared in the Qin estate, the Mo Kingdom capital was currently under martial law, and the northern and southern city gates were closed. Only the eastern and western city gates allowed entry and exit. But according to the rules, commoners and some peddlers could only go through the western city gate. Thus, the line to enter the city was very long as it was nearing noon. In consideration of the commoners, there was no need to pay any fees to enter and exit the Mo Kingdom capital. However, the situation these 2 days was very special, so the speed of inspection and clearance was extremely slow. The Mo Kingdom capital was Northern Mo's largest city, so the quality of the city guards was extremely high. Nothing unpleasant happened, and although the line was long, it was very orderly. The people on the donkey cart kept craning their necks to look at the entrance of the city gate, their eyes filled with longing. They all had disheveled hair and dirty faces, not much better than the ragged family of 3 behind them. "Auntie Nyo, is what you said true? If I come to the Mo Kingdom capital, will I be able to find Granny and the rest?" The young woman who spoke had a tanned face from being exposed to the sun and wind. Her figure was very thin, and she was holding the hand of a 12-year-old son who was also thin and small. His cheeks were so thin that they were sunken in. "Hey, you don't believe me? I'm telling you, Su Jiao, your mother-in-law and the eldest branch's family are living very well. In the past, they were doing very well in Shijiao City. 2 years ago, they moved out of Shijiao City without a word. I spent a lot of time and effort before finding out that they came to the Mo Kingdom capital." The old woman who spoke had an envious look in her eyes. She had a protruding chin, revealing her thick black teeth when she opened her mouth. Su Jiao was precisely the daughter-in-law of old Xiao's third branch. Ever since the day of the zombie outbreak, old Xiao's third branch's family of 3 had been completely unlucky. Back then, they didn't manage to hitch a ride on the eldest branch's cart and were left behind in the village. As they fled, they almost lost their lives. If it weren't for her family's Qiao Zhongheng erupting with a special ability at the crucial moment, how could the mother and son have escaped the tiger's den? They might have long been fed to a large pile of zombies. Because they left in a hurry, they practically didn't take anything with them. The Qiao family of 3 didn't want to recall their past misery. Chapter 558. Seated on the lazy donkey cart were Granny Nyo and her family from the Wei family village. Many of their large family of more than a dozen people had died in the past few years, and only 7 people, including Granny Nyo, were left. The lazy donkey had also lost a lot of weight, so it was impossible for it to pull 7 people on a long journey. It cursed and fought the entire way, desperately rushing to the Mo Kingdom capital. Speaking of the Qiao family, Granny Nyo had a bellyful of anger. Back in Shijiao City, Granny Nyo's family insisted that Xiao Wenwan killed their third son and frequently came to collect debts. In the beginning, the Qiao family would still give them some food and cloth. But after a long time, even Xiao Zhongbang, who had the best temper in the Qiao family, became annoyed with them and instructed the city lord to guard strictly. As long as their family appeared, they would be immediately chased far away. Later on, they simply couldn't approach the Qiao family in Pear Blossom Alley. Suffering from hunger and cold every day, several people in their family starved to death. Your old Xiao's eldest branch couple simply aren't humans. Granny Nyo angrily said, "I'm telling you, Su Jiao, you still have to find elderly lady for this matter. As long as elderly lady agrees, we might be able to stay. It's no use finding the eldest branch couple. Those 2 have hearts as hard as iron. Back then, my family's youngest grandson was so sick that he was about to die, but they weren't willing to give him a mouthful of hot soup." That's right, that's right. Granny Nyo's eldest daughter-in-law, Madame Ne Bo, tugged Su Jiao's hand and earnestly advised, "Look at our 4th branch's family of 3, they all starved to death. It's clear how harsh and ungrateful your old Xiao's eldest branch is. They simply didn't tell us when they moved away from Shijiao City back then." "Bah, tell us. They deliberately avoided us and directly moved away from Shijiu City. Granny Nyo spat and turned her head to the side in an eccentric manner. I'm telling you, Su Jiao, your old Xiao's eldest branch is living well. They definitely have better prospects, so they moved to the Mo Kingdom capital. Otherwise, why do you think they moved here? Isn't that logical? Auntie's words are very reasonable, Su Jiao said with a dark face. Sister-in-law, look at how hungry your Xiaolong is. They're both old Xiao's grandsons. Why should I? Madame Bo continued to pick and winked at the second branch's daughter-in-law. Madame Sun hurriedly followed up with a few words, but Madame Sun had always been clumsy with words, so she couldn't say much. Upon seeing this, Madame Bo irritably glared at her sister-in-law. She tugged on Su Jiao's hand and persuaded earnestly, Sister-in-law, I'm only telling you this because I think you're my own sister-in-law. Back then, our family was screwed over miserably by your first branch. Not only did the fourth branch's family of 3 starve to death, but the second branch's, oh, you can ask my sister-in-law, her 2 daughters also starved to death. At the mention of her 2 daughters who had starved to death, Sun Shi hurriedly wiped away her tears. At that time, there wasn't enough food at home. It must have been enough for the 3 sons of the first branch of the Wei family to eat. She gave birth to 3 daughters, but they didn't get much food. In the end, 2 of them starved to death. Granny Nyo waved her hand and said, in short, let's try our best to contact your granny first. The Mo Kingdom capital is so big, who knows where to find them. Su Jiao was so angry that her stomach hurt. When she recalled how her family of 3 had suffered for so many years, yet the first branch's people actually ate and drank well, she felt indignant. Humph, I don't believe that we can't find your old Xiao family with so many of us. Chapter 559. Not to mention how Su Jiao's party had persistently searched for the Qiao family's whereabouts after entering the city with evil intentions. The Crown Prince's carriage had already entered Minshan Avenue. When they were a dozen meters away from the Marquis of Jiayuan's estate, they saw a bunch of half-grown brats crowding around a corner, kicking and punching something. Young master, is it about time? This punk actually dared to speak rudely to young master, he deserves to be beaten to death. Continue beating. A small boy's clear and crisp voice rang out as he harumphed, he actually dares to scold me time and time again. Beat him to death for me. Hee, Xiao Sen, I heard that this guy seems to be the youngest son of Taichung Temple's deputy minister. If we beat him to death, will something happen? What can happen? I have big brother here. The small boy raised his head and harumphed with his hands on his hips. Let's see if he still dares to oppose me in the academy in the future. I'll beat whoever I want to beat. Beat him. Use more strength, did you not eat? Huh, that's right. We could beat him without fail in the past, let alone now. Now, your dad has been conferred the title of Marquis of Jiayuan by the great king. You're the only son of a marquis, who dares to provoke you? Gao Fong, what are you wasting your breath for? Hurry and use more strength. I'm telling you, if you can't cripple him today, don't even think about having an easy time. Young master, can we do it if he's crippled? Why can't we do it? My big brother will take care of everything. Beat him as much as you want. Beat him ruthlessly. The small boy directed his lackeys to beat and kick the boy who had curled up into a ball in the circle. All right, young master, rest and watch this one exert his strength. Arbor was still in the carriage when he clenched his small fists tightly. The Crown Prince coughed and was just about to say something when he was abruptly glared at by the little one's clear and cold eyes. His heart instantly thumped, and he inwardly cursed. The big brother he's talking about is you. Arbor's lips curled slightly as he asked coldly. Jojo, listen to me. Prince cursed his brother-in-law in his heart. Xiao Sen is still young. Let's teach him slowly. Arbor didn't want to pay any more attention to him. He lifted the curtain with a swish, and before the carriage came to a stop, he jumped down, frightening the coachman. "What are you doing? Why aren't you stopping yet?" Xiao Mu shouted angrily. The 7 or 8 youths who were beating up the other youths simultaneously stopped and turned around to look. When they saw the young lady in front of them looking at them with her cold eyes, they couldn't help but shiver slightly. Intimidated by her terrifying aura, they all huddled together. Arbor's gaze fell on a 7 or 8-year-old boy in the front row. Draped in a thick deer fur cloak and wearing a brocade robe embroidered with golden thread, the little boy had red lips, white teeth, and bright eyes. His little face was red from the cold wind, and he was very cute. Looking at the lively little person in front of him, Arbor's cold eyes loosened a bit. "You, who are you? Why are you poking your nose into my business?" The little boy looked at Arbor with an inexplicable fear in his heart. He opened his mouth, but still straightened his neck and scolded. When the Crown Prince heard that this was bad, he hurriedly lifted the curtain and stepped down from the carriage. Just as he was about to speak, he heard Arbor laugh coldly. "You're so young, yet you don't learn good things. You're acting like a hedonistic son of a rich family. Why aren't you letting him go?" She shouted angrily, and the servant who was pressing down the little boy with a bruised nose and swollen face was so shocked that he retracted his hand and subconsciously trembled. Chapter 560. The little boy was also enraged. He stepped forward and kicked that boy with a bruised nose and a swollen face. Placing both hands on his waist, he roared fearlessly, "Who is he to you? If you want to stand up for him, you have to figure out who I am first. I'm telling you. In this Mo Kingdom capital, no one dares to provoke me, little tyrant Xiao Sen." The Crown Prince sweated profusely from the side. "Fuck, you already proclaimed yourself as little tyrant, so what else could the Crown Prince say?" The Crown Prince wished for nothing more than to go up and cover that child's mouth. He face-bombed and called out, "Jojo." He was thinking about how to put in a few good words for his little brother-in-law to smooth over this matter. This child really hit the jackpot today. This child was clearly very obedient in front of the elders on normal days. Why was he so unlucky today? Arbor turned back in anger and glared fiercely at the Crown Prince. The fury in his heart rushed up from the darkest corner at once. He rushed forward in 3 steps, picked up his little brother with one hand, and slapped him twice on the back without any explanation. These 2 slaps weren't light either. Our dear Xiao Sen had never suffered this kind of grievance since he was young, and he started crying with a wah. The 2 henchmen beside him were anxious. They rolled up their sleeves, wanting to pick a fight with Arbor as they cursed, "What are you doing? What are you doing? You don't want to live anymore. You even dare to provoke the little sir of our Marquis of Jiayuan's estate." Seeing that things were getting out of hand, the Crown Prince hurriedly shouted, "Stop." Our dear Xiao Sen hadn't seen this lord at first, but when he heard the familiar voice, he turned around and looked like he had seen a relative he hadn't seen in 800 years. He shook his little arms and legs, wailing as he struggled to break free from Arbor's grasp. He raised both hands in Prince Mo's direction and shouted with all his might, "Big brother, big brother. Big brother, save me, big brother." However, his big brother couldn't save him today either. Not only couldn't he save him, but Big Brother also had a bad feeling. It was very likely that he would be thoroughly implicated by this pig of a brother-in-law. That it was over. The Crown Prince stole a glance at the little fellow's expression. It was really over. The little lass had gotten angry. That stoic face was already completely filled with fury, and her eyes were even more blazing. "Come with me. Come with me to someone else's house and apologize." Arbor reprimanded angrily. "You want me to apologize to him?" Xiao Sen jumped up like an angry little animal. With 2 lines of tears on his face, he shouted angrily, "I'm not going. I'm the young master of the Marquis estate. Who does he think he is? His father was just a small government official. I won't apologize to him. The crown prince ran over to cover his brother-in-law's mouth, but it was too late. Xiao Mu had already kicked her younger brother in anger. She was extremely measured in this kick, so it was actually not heavy. It was just that it made our dear Xiao Sun sprawl on the ground. Feeling especially ashamed, he opened his mouth and started bawling loudly. The crown prince hurriedly rushed forward and picked up his brother-in-law. Arbor ignored him. He reached out and pulled the little boy who was being beaten to his side. He patted his dirty little robe and held his little hand. Don't be afraid. You're a good child. Big sister will definitely make that bad child apologize to you. That little boy was also a tough nut to crack. He looked to be about the same age as Xiao Sun, but he didn't utter a word after being beaten to this extent. He didn't even shed a single tear. Xiao Sun stayed in the crown prince's arms. When he heard Arbor call him a bad child, he immediately refused to comply. He cried and yelled, "I'm not a bad child, I'm not a bad child. Big brother, she scolded me. Big brother." Chapter 561. The crown prince's face was full of helplessness. He reached out and lightly pinched his waist, saying softly, "Shut up, this is your sister. Your big sister is back." Little Xiao Sen's stupefied face was still hanging with 2 lines of tears. His expression was especially comical. The crown prince glared at him, annoyed and amused. He said softly to him, "You've angered your sister quite badly, let me tell you. You have to coax her properly. Otherwise, if you're unlucky, I'll also be unlucky with you." Big sister. The big sister that father and mother often talked about, the one who went to a super large sect to cultivate. Little Xiao Sen immediately became listless. "Look at how you've beaten him up. I don't believe that this is what mother taught you. Bullying others with your power. Utterly unreasonable." Arbor was so angry that he wanted to go up and beat this stinking brat. The crown prince hurriedly stopped him and smiled apologetically, "Jojo, your brother is still young. Don't hit him, don't hit him. Go away. Don't protect him all the time. Look at how you've taught him. At such a young age, you've earned yourself the title of the capital's little overlord. You've really given old Xiao's family face." Little Xiao Sen shrank into the crown prince's embrace and looked at his fuming sister in silence, sobbing and unable to speak. "Get down and immediately go to their house with me to apologize. I'm telling you, if you don't apologize today, I'll... apologize, apologize. Little Sen is very obedient, he'll definitely go and apologize." The crown prince hurriedly pulled down the little fellow's raised hand and winked at his brother-in-law. I am sorry, Ren Hongfei. I won't bully you in the future. In the academy, I'll take care of you." When the little fellow saw the crown prince's expression, he immediately wilted and hurriedly apologized to the little boy with a bruised nose and swollen face. Go to his house. Arbor was so angry that he didn't enter the Qiao estate's main gate. He directly pulled the 2 children into the carriage and turned his head to the side with a sullen face, not saying a word. The crown prince's heart was beating like a drum as he watched. He went up and secretly hooked her little finger, but Miss Qiao threw him away. The crown prince's handsome face immediately turned green. It's over. This time, he was really dragged down by his pig-like brother-in-law. What to do? The crown prince's carriage made a detour to the residence of Ren Pingjing, the deputy minister of Taichung Temple. Ren Pingjing was practicing calligraphy in his study when he heard that His Highness the Crown Prince had come. He immediately called his wife and 2 sons to change clothes and go out to welcome the Crown Prince's carriage. His mind was in a daze. "This official greets your highness. I did not know your highness is coming. Wei Chen did not go out to meet you." Ren Pingjing, together with his wife and son, hastily opened the front door and went out to greet Wei Chen. Compared to the empty Minshan Avenue, the path in front of the Taichung Temple's deputy minister's house appeared to be extremely lively. When the commoners heard that the crown prince's carriage had arrived at Sir Ren's residence, they hurriedly knelt down to pay their respects. "Welcome, Your Highness." Madame Ren was a typical sweet-tempered woman. Although she was anxious when she saw her youngest son being led over with a bloody nose and a swollen face, she didn't criticize him. Instead, she gently brought her eldest son and second son to greet him. The crown prince was a little embarrassed. He reached out and shook Arbor's little hand. "This is the crown princess." Our dear crown princess was in a fit of anger. She couldn't be bothered to pay attention to him and slapped his hand away. Ren Pingjing and Madame Ren were astonished for a moment. When they saw the young lady in front of them clearly, they couldn't help but sigh inwardly and hurriedly went up to greet her. "Greetings, Crown Princess." Chapter 562. Xiao Sen, kneel down. Arbor turned her head and looked at her younger brother sternly. The crown prince, who was despised by his wife, coughed lightly and reminded his brother-in-law that it was best not to anger his sister at this time. Xiao Sen knelt down aggrievedly and lowered his head. He didn't look like the little tyrant in the academy at all. Arbor led Ren Hongfei to Madame Ren and bowed. Sir Ren and Madame Ren were so shocked that they hurriedly moved away and returned the greeting. "Sir Ren, Madame Ren, I'm really sorry. My younger brother was negligent in disciplining him and beat your son to this state. I'm really worried." Arbor said softly, "On the way here, I already examined your son. Fortunately, they are all superficial wounds, so I'll give this bottle of pills to your son. Take the red pills orally and apply them externally. He will recover in 2 days." "Crown Princess, you're exaggerating." Sir Ren and Madame Ren bowed. Arbor shook her head. "It's my younger brother's fault." Arbor glanced coldly at Xiao Sen, who was sneaking glances at her, and said, "Xiao Yao, go get the ferule." Xiao Yao glanced at the miserable Xiao Sen and hurriedly begged for mercy. "Miss, young master is still young and insensible. He won't dare to do this again in the future. Let's forget about it this time. He'll be 8 years old after the new year. Look at the 8-year-old children in other families. Which one of them is as crafty and undisciplined as him? Where are the books and etiquette that he learned in the academy?" Arbor looked coldly at Xiao Yao. "Are you not going to listen to what I say?" "Yes." Xiao Yao immediately shriveled and hurriedly turned around to get the ferule. Madame Ren wanted to stop her, but Arbor stopped her. She turned around and stared coldly at Xiao Senior. "Do you admit defeat when elder sister hit you today?" "Elder sister, I know I was wrong." Xiao Sen looked fearfully at the cold ferule and looked pleadingly at the crown prince who was standing at the side. Prince received his brother-in-law's gaze and hurriedly reached out to pull Arbor's small hand. "Jojo, Xiao Sen knows he's wrong. Let's." "You're still protecting him." Arbor was furious. He pushed the crown prince's hand away and shouted at his younger brother, "Hand." Xiao Sen shuddered and raised his little hand involuntarily. "Pa!" The ruler landed on his tiny palm, causing little Xiao Sen to tremble in pain as he burst into tears. After 3 slaps, Crown Prince saw that his brother-in-law's hands were red and swollen, crying pitifully. He couldn't bear it and went forward to grab his little wife. "Jojo, that's enough. Xiao Sen will definitely be obedient in the future. Don't worry, he'll definitely remember this and won't bully his classmates in the future." As he spoke, he quickly winked at Xiao. Senator Xiao Sen wailed, "Sister, I was wrong. Sister, sob sob sob." Madame Ren didn't dare to offend the crown prince's brother-in-law and hurriedly tried to dissuade him, saying that it was just children playing around and shouldn't be taken too seriously. After sending off the furious crown princess, the couple looked at each other and pulled their youngest son in front of them to take a closer look. Sure enough, they saw that the wounds on his hands and face had been carefully treated. The medicine used was also unheard of and was very precious. Some of the small wounds on the child's face had already healed. Elder sister is a good person, Ren Hongfei said softly. His father glared at him. What nonsense are you saying? That's Her Highness the Crown Princess. How can you casually claim kinship? Remember this in the future. Chapter 563. After going back and forth, they didn't even have time to drink a mouthful of water, let alone have a reunion dinner. By the time they returned to the Qiao estate, it was already past lunchtime. It was already afternoon. Jojo, don't be angry. The Crown Prince hastily corrected his attitude and admitted his mistake as soon as he got on the carriage. He then gave his brother-in-law a meaningful glance. Our dear Qiao Sen was someone who knew when to yield and when not to. When he saw that his all-powerful older brother had to carefully curry favor with his older sister, he knew that he couldn't afford to offend his older sister. He hastily reached out to hug his older sister's leg and wailed, "Older sister, I was wrong. Older sister, please forgive me." He had always maintained the image of an obedient and clever child in front of his family's elders. Wei Ziqin and the others were completely unaware of his nickname as the capital's little tyrant. When this little fellow first arrived in the capital, he wasn't that daring. It was mainly after experiencing a few incidents that he realized his older brother was especially capable and powerful, so he started to become increasingly fearless. As long as he suffered any grievances, he just had to cry in front of his older brother, and the matter would immediately be resolved. At first, there were still people who dared to bully him in the academy, but later on, not only did they make a detour when they saw him, but they were also especially fawning over him. When they saw him, they would call him little young Master Qiao and were extremely respectful. He would go to his older brother for anything he wanted. If he got into any trouble, he would also go to his older brother. His older brother would run over to his house every 2 to 3 days, and he would bring a lot of gifts every time he came back. He basically allowed the little fellow to take whatever he wanted. In addition, he was the only male grandchild in the entire old Qiao family, so old madam doted on him a lot. Sometimes, when Wei Ziqin wanted to scold him, old madam would protect him. This child's one sentence had the effect of hundreds of people responding to his call. Qiao Sen was young and lived an arrogant and luxurious life. How could his little tail not fly to the sky? Now, he finally knew how terrifying his older sister was. If he offended his older sister, even his older brother couldn't protect him. Thus, this older sister was very powerful. He was young, but he knew how to read people's expressions. When he saw that his older sister's expression had softened, he cried even harder and begged for mercy. Arbor didn't want to beat him up. She just recalled her previous life. She had a good younger brother who was raised crooked by Wen Rowan and became a hedonistic debauchee. He would fight with others in the brothel all day long and was beaten to death at the age of 16. Thinking of this, she turned her little head away and looked out the window with reddened eyes, not saying a word. The Crown Prince's heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly reached out and hugged the little one. His heart was filled with regret and sadness. "I'm sorry, Jojo. I swear, I won't spoil him anymore. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. It's all because I've always been obedient to him. That's why he's acting so lawlessly. Don't be angry with yourself. Just hit me." The Crown Prince took her small hand and patted his chest. "Hit me hard." Xiao Mu turned her head to glare at him. This really was a peerlessly good brother. Little did she know that the Crown Prince was also tricked by his brother-in-law. His brother-in-law was usually well-mannered and well-behaved in front of him. He didn't live in the Qiao estate and would usually come and go in a hurry. He would visit his parents-in-law and leave a gift before leaving. He was only a 7 or 8-year-old child. How could he know that this kid was so crafty and usually put on an act? When Mou, that brat, was young, the Crown Prince also allowed his younger brother to do whatever he wanted and gave him whatever he wanted. This brother-in-law was no different from his own younger brother, Who would have thought that his brother-in-law would be so tricked. 10:00 in the morning. Chapter 564. The carriage turned back to Minshan Avenue and slowly moved along the bluestone paved street. In the carriage, Xiao Sen sobbed for a while. His little face was flushed red, and he looked rather pitiful. Arbor looked at his red and swollen hand and pursed her lips without saying a word. After a while, when his sobbing subsided, she pulled his arm in front of her and flipped her hand to take out a small bottle of ointment. The ointment's effect of removing blood stasis and reducing swelling was naturally excellent. After applying a small piece, Xiao Sen's red and swollen hand immediately reduced by more than half. "Sister, are you still angry?" Xiao Sen peeked at his sister and said weakly. "Xiao Senator's sister beat you up. Do you blame me?" Arbor asked softly and stopped what she was doing. Xiao Sen hurriedly shook his head. This child was very clever. When he saw his big brother's gaze, which clearly said, "You dare to blame me? Brother will beat you up again immediately," this little rascal immediately cowered. "Then tell me, why did sister have to mercilessly punish you today?" Xiao Mu asked. Xiao Sen peeked at the crown prince, who glared at him unhappily. He hurriedly turned back and said, I shouldn't have bullied Ren Hongfei. I won't bully him in the future. That's not entirely the reason." Arbor looked at him indifferently. She put aside the ointment in her hand and said softly, "It's sister's heartache. How could my little brother be like this? Sister doesn't ask you to bring peace to the world through martial arts, but at least, the little brother in my heart can maintain a trace of kindness. Unlike the one in front of us, who bullies the weak and unreasonable. Is it fun to bully him? There are so many of you, but you beat and kicked him. Do you have any face?" Little Xiao Sen sniffled and went up to hug his sister's arm pitifully. He swore with all his might, "Sister, I won't do it again. Please don't be angry. Sister, Xiao Sen will change. I will definitely change." Big sister's snow moon-like bright eyes revealed disappointment, which made little Xiao Sen feel very uncomfortable. "Who is that Gao Fong? He's also from the academy. His father is one of the richest merchants in the city." Arbor didn't immediately ask her brother to cut ties with Gao Fong, even though she knew that Gao Fong was one of Xiao Sen's friends in her previous life. However, considering that the child might have a negative reaction, she temporarily suppressed it and did not say anything. The reason why Xiao Sen was like this was inseparable from his family's upbringing. Fortunately, he was still young and could be taught. Therefore, Arbor did not continue to scold him. Instead, he looked out of the window thoughtfully. She did not believe that her parents would teach Xiao Sen to be such a bully. There must be a reason behind it. At this moment, the carriage had already arrived at the main entrance of the Marquis of Jiayuan's estate. Wei Ziqin was anxiously waiting at the door. She had just heard that when Jojo came back, he happened to see Xiao Sen fighting with someone. This child did not enter the house and directly took Xiao Sen to the other party's house to apologize. She didn't know what had happened and was feeling anxious. When she saw the carriage stop in front of the door, her eyes lit up. Wei Ziqin took a few steps down the stairs with excitement in her heart. She saw the curtain lift and a 14 to 15-year-old girl draped in ice sable fur came out of the carriage. Her otherworldly face, which was made of ice and snow, crashed into Wei Ziqin's eyes, causing her to be dazed for a moment. It was as if she saw that Madame Wei's heart was filled with comfort. Her eyes instantly became blurry with tears. The scroll was finished. Chapter 565. With a glance, Xiao Mu saw her mother standing at the entrance, and the corners of her eyes and forehead had clearly increased with fine wrinkles. In an instant, Arbor's heart was filled with longing. She quickly walked towards her mother, walking faster and faster until she was sprinting. Wei Ziqin also hurriedly ran down the steps. She shook off the hand of a servant girl who wanted to support her and ran towards her daughter with open arms. Mother! Arbor rushed over and was immediately pulled into Wei Zichin's arms. Wei Zichin reached out and patted her on the back. With tears in her eyes, she scolded, "You stinky child. Tell me, what did you tell mother when you left? You said that you'd be back in 3 years if you were fast. What about now? How many years has it been? How many years have you not been back? You haven't even written a letter in 2 to 3 years. You're deliberately making mother worried to death. You child." "I'm sorry, mother." Arbor raised her head with red eyes. She acted coquettishly in her mother's arms and said pitifully, "Something happened and daughter couldn't make it back in time. Look, you're going to be a girl of marriageable age soon, but you're still acting coquettishly in mother's arms." Wei Zichin smiled through her tears and reached out to poke the little girl's forehead. When she looked up at Mo Yen, who was quickly following behind, her face was filled with embarrassment. "Little Mo, I've made a fool of myself in front of you." "How could that be, Auntie? Let's talk inside." Okay. Jojo's father and second uncle still don't know that Jojo is back. Come, let's go inside first." Wei Zichin held her daughter's hand and looked at Prince Mo with regret. Crown Prince Mo found his mother-in-law's regretful gaze very strange no matter how he looked at it. What a pity. Wei Zichin sighed in her heart. She didn't know what was wrong with the great king of the Mo kingdom. Why did he suddenly decree a marriage for his daughter? Otherwise, she would have thought highly of Xiaomo. Xiaomo was a mature and steady child with a good temper. Most importantly, he was filial. It was hard to find such a good boy. Although he was a few years younger than their daughter, he was older and could dote on her. Besides, the two of them were a match made in heaven and could be considered childhood sweethearts. The couple knew Xiaomo well, so they could rest assured leaving their daughter in his care. It was a match made in heaven. But now, sigh. Although her daughter was about to be of marriageable age, in Wei Zichin's eyes, she was still too young. The palace was also a place full of trouble, so how could she bear to harm her own daughter? However, the king's orders could not be disobeyed. Ever since that strange imperial edict was issued, Wei Zichin had not eaten much for lunch. Her heart was filled with anxiety. Arbor snuck a glance at the crown prince, then turned and waved at Xiao Sen, who was alighting from the carriage. Xiao Sen skipped forward in small steps, his head shrinking back slightly. When Wei Zichin saw this naughty and mischievous youngest son, her face turned stern. "Xiao Sen, what were you doing at the door just now? Why did you anger your eldest sister the moment she returned?" Xiao Sen immediately hugged his mother's thigh. "Mother, elder sister has already forgiven Xiao Senior. Aya, little young master, what happened to your hand?" A servant girl with a delicate face and a tall figure quickly walked out from Wei Zichin's side. She bent down and picked up Xiao Sen's small hand, softly saying a sentence. Wei Zichin's gaze landed on her youngest son's hand. Although most of the swelling on Xiao Sen's hand had disappeared, it was still a little red. It just didn't look as frightening as before. Chapter 566. Wei Zichin frowned. "Donghe, why aren't you greeting eldest miss? You're so unruly." Only then did the maidservant named Donghe put down Xiao Sen's hand in terror. She turned around and gave Arbor a salute. "Donghe greets eldest Mississippi." Arbor swept a glance at her before turning to look at her mother. Wei Zichin smiled. "You haven't returned for many years, and you don't know that there are many new people in the family. Let's go in first. Little young master, does your hand still hurt?" Donghe followed behind and asked softly. "Little young master must be tired. This servant will carry you in." Little Xiao Sen was just about to lie down on Donghe like in the past. Only to see her eldest sister abruptly turn her head, her clear and cold eyes abruptly glared at that servant girl. "Let go!" This furious shout immediately gave Dong He, as well as the two manservants guarding the door, a huge fright. Dong He seemed to have been bitten by a venomous snake as she hurriedly retracted her hands. "Can't you walk by yourself?" Arbor was impatient with this kind of young master and young miss behavior. She looked coldly at the maidservant named Dong He. "How old are you already? What kind of person are you to hang out with all these dubious people all day long?" The eyes of the dubious maidservant Dong He immediately reddened from grievance. She gritted her teeth and lowered her head, concealing the unwillingness in her eyes. "Walk properly. How many times has mother told you that you should be scolded by your eldest sister if you don't have proper manners?" Wei Ziqin patted her son in annoyance and pulled him into the house. Little Qiaosan obediently stepped into the house by himself. Steward Chang Zai, who came after hearing the news, greeted eldest miss with a face full of smiles and then followed along. Seeing many unfamiliar faces along the way, Arbor couldn't help but frown. "Mother, why are there so many idle people in the house?" "Idle people." The corner of Chang Zai's mouth twitched. Sure enough, little master didn't like those extra servants. Wei Ziqin looked at her daughter in amusement. The mother and daughter pair held hands and walked affectionately toward the main hall. "Actually, it's not that many people. Your grandmother likes the house to be more lively, so she bought more than 10 servant girls. Your grandmother left 2 servant girls to accompany her and chat with her. All in all, our Qiao family has a total of 21 people. Compared to the rules of a normal manor, there are far fewer manservants and maids." Wei Ziqin said to her daughter in a kind manner. Arbor turned his head and glared at the crown prince unhappily. It must be this fellow who sent this and that every 2 to 3 days, making the family very rich. Otherwise, how could father and second uncle go out to do missions from time to support such a large number of people? Speaking of which, these idlers were mostly supported by the crown prince. Prince stepped forward innocently and hooked Arbor's little finger. "Jojo. Auntie was right. There weren't many new servants in the house. Now that the courtyard is so big, it's troublesome to take care of it. You don't want Auntie to work too hard, right?" Arbor snorted and turned his head away, not wanting to pay attention to him. Wei Ziqin, on the other hand, was somewhat alarmed. She hurriedly stepped forward to separate the two people's hands, looking at her daughter with a face that wanted to say something but hesitated. Qiao, mother has something to tell you." Crown Prince was baffled. He didn't understand why his mother-in-law had stepped forward to break up an affectionate couple. "Mother, tell me. What is it?" "Daughter, this morning, the family received an imperial edict. The great king somehow betrothed you to the current crown prince. Tell me about this." AI. Wei Ziqin sighed. Chapter 567. Wiping away her tears, Wei Ziqin looked at the crown prince with regret. She couldn't bear to part ways with the child she thought highly of, so she said, "Little Mo, Auntie knows that you like our family's Qiao. But this matter." Sigh, His Majesty had randomly arranged a matchmaker and had even arranged a marriage for no reason. Men and women are different, so don't get too close to our Jojo in the future. Arbor's mouth twitched. The crown prince was dumbfounded and hurriedly said, "No, Auntie, that. I know." Wei Ziqin interrupted him and sighed. She took Mo Lian's hand and patted it familiarly. Acting like an elder, she said earnestly, "As subjects, it's not appropriate for us to say anything about the great king. But there aren't any outsiders here, so I'll tell you in private. This great king is too reckless. What do you think our Jojo has to do with the crown prince? Our Qiao family has always been a small family, so I can't figure it out. Where did the great king's decree come from?" The crown prince cast a pleading look at Jojo. "You should tell your mother." Xiao Mu didn't say anything and even tugged at her lips as she rolled her eyes at him that said, "Do as you see fit." She then walked forward while holding her mother's arm. "Mom, don't worry about that crown prince. Let's go see Dad and second uncle first. This child, it's fine if you talk about it at home, but don't do this when you're outside. That's the crown prince, you can't disrespect him." Wei Ziqin reminded her daughter. The crown prince felt an inexplicable sense of danger. Would his mother-in-law fly into a rage when she found out the truth and chase him out in a fit of anger? What's going on? Why am I so unlucky today? What's happening today? The group entered the main hall. His father, Qiao Zhongbang, and second uncle, Qiao Zhongxing, who had heard the news, quickly strode in. "Jojo. You're finally willing to come back from the sect." Qiao Zhongxing laughed heartily as he strode towards his niece. "Daughter." Qiao Zhongbang also hurriedly ran over with a joyful expression. "Father, second uncle." Arbor glanced at the two of them and saw that their cultivation bases had both risen slightly. Second uncle was now a level 4 peak body cultivator, while father's cultivation had reached the phenomenal success of level 7 mystic cultivation. Compared to the geniuses of the large sects, the growth of their cultivation was very slow. As time passed, it would be more difficult for them to grow. If he could find the time to refine some Xian breaking pills and body tempering pills, they could help the two of them break through 1 or 2 levels. "Daughter, it's good that you're back. Look, you've lost a lot of weight. Your mother has been nagging me about you every day. When you come back, stay at home and let your mother nourish you well." When the crown prince heard this, he immediately had the urge to grab his wife and run away. If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have sent the little fellow back so quickly. Now that he had entered the house, he couldn't go back. "Older sister." Everyone was chatting when a shout came from the door. Arbor turned around and saw Xiao Lin's rosy little face full of smiles. Her pair of eyes were wrinkled and sparkling as she dashed through the door and threw herself at her. Arbor hurriedly reached out to catch her, her heart instantly filled to the brim. Her younger sister was no longer as pitiful and submissive as she was in her previous life. This little face in high spirits was really beautiful. "Older sister, you're finally back." Xiao Lin was nearly 11 years old and no longer looked as chubby as when she was young. Now, she was a slender little girl. Chapter 568. Xiao Lin, you've grown a lot taller. Arbor looked at her little sister's cheerful figure and her mood was lifted. She had also temporarily thrown all those troublesome matters to the back of her mind. "Sister, you're even prettier than before." All right. These two sisters have only just met and they're already praising each other. Wei Ziqin couldn't help but giggle. She held her daughters in each hand and couldn't hide her fondness for them. "Jojo, mother will take you to see your Nanju garden. You'll live there in the future. If you don't like it, how about we change?" When the crown prince heard that, he was going to live there. The crown prince hurried forward and smiled at Wei Ziqin. "Auntie, Jojo still has to return to the palace today. There's a palace banquet tomorrow night. Auntie must know about it. When the banquet is over, it won't be too late for Jojo to move home in 2 days." The crown prince's words meant that he still had to wait for the banquet to be over before he could return home in 2 days. To put it bluntly, the queen's palace banquet had nothing to do with whether or not Arbor moved home. Even if Xiao Mu were to stay at home now, she would just enter the palace with her mother tomorrow night. After all, her mother was currently a marchioness with a third-rank title, so she definitely had to attend the banquet and meet the noble ladies of the capital while she was at it. Of course, the banquet wouldn't be a good one. This was inevitable. She would see who dared to provoke her. Arbor's mother was led astray by the crown prince's words. When she thought of the palace banquet, she frowned. "Jojo, I don't know what the crown prince's personality is like. When you enter the palace tomorrow, you'll probably have to meet him. I don't know what that great king is thinking. You haven't even reached marriageable age yet and he's already betrothed you to His Highness the Crown Prince. Although there's still some time before the wedding, the status is already set. AI. Her mother began to nag about her daughter's boundless marriage path again, full of worry and worry. Arbor's mouth twitched. She received the Crown Prince's pleading gaze and couldn't help but curse him inwardly. She snorted and turned her face away. The Crown Prince hurriedly stretched out his finger to scratch her small palm and gently tugged at her. Arbor coughed and reached out to hold his mother's arm and said softly, "Mother, do you remember what I told you before? There was once when your daughter was almost kidnapped by someone from an evil sect, but was saved by a young hero." I remember. Of course, Mother remembers. Wei Ziqin's face paled at the mention of this. She still remembered that her daughter had told her that someone from the evil sect had taken a fancy to her daughter's talent and wanted to capture her to make her into a puppet. Yes. Actually, that young swordsman is the current Crown Prince. Wei Ziqin opened her mouth slightly. His Highness saved you. Okay. Arbor nodded. Wei Ziqin said gratefully, "Then Mother must properly thank His Highness the Crown Prince when I enter the palace this time." At this moment, the incompetent brother-in-law standing at the side spoke up, "Big brother, didn't Ren Hongfei's parents just call you Your Highness the Crown Prince? Why should Mother enter the palace to thank you? Can't she thank you now?" Wei Ziqin abruptly turned her head to look at the slender and elegant young man. Her pair of eyes were already wide open. Mo Lien. Xiao Zhongbang suddenly slapped his thigh. This little Mo was called so coherently that no one had thought about it. Actually, that child Mo Lien seemed to have revealed her name the moment she entered the door. Wasn't the current world surnamed Mo? First 5:00. First 5:00 at night. Chapter 569. Xiao Zhongbang, Wei Ziqin, and the others were just about to step forward to salute when Mo Lien hastily stopped them. "Uncle, Auntie, there are no outsiders here, so we won't pay attention to those empty formalities." What a joke. His little wife was glaring at him, so how could he dare to let Xiao Zhongbang and his wife greet him? "I didn't deliberately hide it from you before, so please forgive me." "Your Highness the Crown Prince is too serious," Xiao Zhongbang quickly said. "Uncle, Auntie, you can call me little Mo like you always do at home. Uncle, Auntie, and second uncle are all my elders, so calling me this sounds more intimate." This. Xiao Zhongbang hesitated for a moment, but it was Wei Ziqin who readily agreed. "Little Mo, you're too much. You didn't say anything and made Auntie worry for the entire day." She thought that the great king had randomly arranged the mandarin ducks, but who knew that it was actually a misunderstanding. Arbor stood at the side without uttering a word. She could tell that the Crown Prince had been putting in a lot of effort to visit her family recently. Look at how happy he had coaxed her mother, calling him little Mo this and little Mo that. In the beginning, perhaps there were still some restraints due to her identity, but after chatting for a while, her mother completely recovered to her usual self. Prince Mo chatted with Arbor's mother for a while before turning to smile at Arbor. "See, I already told my future parents-in-law. There's no problem at all, right?" Arbor turned her small head and pulled Xiao Lin's hand. "Xiao Lin, you triggered your mystic meridians." Xiao Lin nodded vigorously. "Last year, a mentor from the Mystic Cultivator Association helped me trigger my mystic meridians successfully. Sister, I'm a level 4 Mystic Cultivator now." A level 4 Mystic Cultivator who wasn't even 11 years old was already considered outstanding talent and excellent constitution. Arbor nodded in satisfaction. "Sister can tell that you worked very hard." Xiao Lin's eyes revealed a smile, and she pursed her small lips. While the family was happily chatting, Dong He's silhouette flashed at the door. She then swiftly went out and hurriedly ran towards the old madam's longevity court. The old lady had just finished her afternoon nap, and Dong-he happened to bump into her as she was getting up. Hearing that Dong-he had rushed over, the old madam's eyes flickered slightly, and she said to the head maid beside her, "Xiaoyan, bring her in." Soon, Dong-he's tall figure appeared before Wang Shi's eyes. "Dong-he, you came to find me in such a hurry. Did something happen on master's side?" Old madam held a cup of tea and drank it unhurriedly. Her eyes swept over Dong-he who was kneeling in front of her without batting an eyelid. Dong-he hurriedly crawled to old madam on her knees and deliberately squeezed out 2 drops of tears. "Old madam, I'm afraid you still don't know. Young miss is back." "What?" The old lady was shocked. At the mention of Arbor, her heart was filled with a pair of icy eyes, and the hand holding the teacup froze for no reason. Dong-he didn't detect old madam's abnormality and even added fuel to the fire as she complained, "Young miss really is an old-fashioned and strict person. As soon as she entered the house, she beat up little young master without any explanation. Little young master is only so old. What does a 7 or 8-year-old know? Young miss beat little young master's palm until it was red and swollen. It really makes one's heart ache. Madam actually didn't say anything and just let young miss do as she pleased. This servant really can't stand it anymore. Moreover, old madam, young miss has been back for so long, but she actually didn't come over to pay respects to you. She's seriously too unfilial." Dong-he pursed her lips. Chapter 570. Just now, this servant saw that little young master was beaten so pitifully, so this servant wanted to carry little young master away to apply some ointment. Who knew that eldest miss would berate this servant without any explanation and even say that this servant is that kind of indecent person? Dong-he continued to complain with an aggrieved expression, "Old madam, in any case, this servant is someone that you assigned to master and madam. Eldest miss not giving this servant any face clearly shows that she doesn't put old madam in her eyes." With every sentence that Dong-he said, Wang Nei's expression turned worse by a few degrees. Finally, she slammed the table and shouted angrily, "This little girl's temper has grown increasingly these few years. This old one wants to meet her. Look at how good my good granddaughter is now to be able to do something like beating her own younger brother the moment she entered the house, causing the entire family to be in a state of chaos." Having achieved her goal, Dong-he secretly revealed a sinister smile. She hurriedly wiped away her tears and stood up, following old madam with small steps. Xiaoyan frowned and caught up with old madam's footsteps. She whispered, "Old madam, you're going to the antechamber by yourself? Then why are you looking for eldest miss? Don't forget, eldest miss's current status is completely different. Early this morning, His Majesty issued a marriage decree and has already betrothed her to His Highness the Crown Prince. Eldest miss is now Her Highness the Crown Princess. There's a difference between a monarch and a subject. If you rashly rush over to reprimand her like this and someone with ulterior motives finds out, they will definitely make a big fuss about it." Thinking carefully, old madam almost broke out in a cold sweat. She turned to look at Xiaoyan and nodded repeatedly. Xiaoyan's words are very true. Seeing that old madam was actually about to back down, how could Dong-he be willing to comply? She hurriedly added fuel to the fire and said, "Old madam, even if eldest miss is now Her Highness the Crown Princess, the current great king is also someone who pays attention to filial piety. Could she disrespect her grandmother just because she was the Crown Prince consort?" This servant heard that when the Empress Dowager was ill, His Highness the Crown Prince had also attended to the Empress Dowager for several days. As the Crown Prince's official wife, the Crown Princess is a role model for the entire world. The word filial piety is enough to firmly suppress her. "Dong-he, why are you stirring up trouble here? What intentions did he have? Could it be that you want to see the old madam and the Crown Princess at odds?" She had long known that this Dong-he wasn't a good person. Although she was quick-witted, she was too scheming. If Xiaoyan knew that Donghe was here today to pick a fight with the crown princess, Xiaoyan would really regret not blocking her at the door and directly chasing her out. As servants, all they had to do was to be tactful. How could there be so much trouble? This Donghe was probably reprimanded by the crown princess and couldn't hold back her anger, so she ran over to challenge the old madam to stand up for her. However, the old madam was already so old. Recently, she had become more and more powerless. In fact, the right way to go was to enjoy her old age safely. Why would she bother arguing with a junior when she had nothing to do? Sister Xiaoyan, what are you saying? All right, help this old woman over to take a look. Donghe's words were somewhat reasonable. Even the current crown prince didn't dare to be unfilial. She didn't believe that her granddaughter would dare to be disrespectful to her. When this servant left the antechamber just now, I heard them talking about it. It turns out that the young master who often comes to our residence to visit Madam and Master is His Highness the Crown Prince. He's the Crown Prince? Wang Mei was shocked. Soon after, she couldn't help but sigh. Such a graceful and elegant young man, this old woman felt at first glance that he was either wealthy or respectable. However, I didn't expect that his status would be so high. Chapter 571. When elderly lady was helped into the room, everyone was happily chatting. As soon as elderly lady Wang entered, the entire living room was dead silent. Everyone stood up to welcome elderly lady Wang and stole glances at each other. Seeing that elderly lady Wang didn't come with good intentions, they couldn't help exchanging glances. On the other hand, Arbor didn't say anything. When her mother stood up, she also stood up and bowed to elderly lady Wang with her mother before sitting down. No one could find fault with this etiquette. However, elderly lady Wang was furious and disliked the little stoic no matter how she looked at her. She had a stoic expression on her face all day, and it was the same for 7 to 8 years. It was as if someone owed her a huge debt. Xiao Sen, come to grandmother. After elderly lady Wang sat down, she beckoned to Xiao. Senator Xiao Sen bounced over, and elderly lady Wang pulled up his small hand. When elderly lady Wang saw that her grandson's hand was indeed still red and swollen, her expression changed abruptly, and she turned to berate Arbor. Eldest lass, so what if you're back? Is there a need to cause such a big commotion? This is your biological younger brother, not someone picked up from the streets. Look at you, you dragged him to someone else's house to torment him as soon as you came back, beating and scolding him. This old one and your parents aren't dead yet. It's not your turn to meddle in your younger brother's upbringing. Arbor's icy gaze shot straight at elderly lady Wang. The sharp glint in her gaze immediately frightened elderly lady Wang so much that her heart skipped a beat. Elderly lady Wang hadn't seen this lass for several years, but she didn't expect her gaze to be even sharper now. This gaze was practically able to cut open her old bones. However, elderly lady Wang currently valued this little grandson and couldn't bear to see him suffer any grievances. Even if she was a bit cowardly, she still couldn't resist standing up for her grandson. Donghe stood next to elderly lady Wang and pursed her lips as she secretly snickered, waiting to see eldest miss suffer. All of a sudden, eldest miss stood up abruptly, and a pair of icy eyes abruptly shifted to her. The front hall was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. Donghe felt that her heart was about to leap out of her chest. In a flash, eldest young miss had already arrived in front of her. Without any explanation, a heavy slap landed on her cheek. This slap was truly beautiful. Donghe immediately opened her mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood that was mixed with 2 teeth. She fell to the ground with a plop and started whimpering. Her pupils constricted and were filled with disbelief and terror. The old lady was so frightened by the servant girl's actions that her face drained of color. She thought that the servant girl had rushed up to hit her, but it turned out that the servant girl next to her had attacked her. She suddenly remembered that a few years ago, she had called upon the 2 grandnephews of the Wang family to fight with her. At that time, her granddaughter was only 7 years old. At that time, she had not been able to gain any advantage from her hands. Ever since she was 7 years old, this girl had always been fierce and no one dared to bully her. "Old madam, is this what you taught? A little servant girl also dares to turn her nose up at me. What kind of thing is she?" Arbor berated, scolding mercilessly. A servant girl, dressing herself up like a concubine, wearing red and green and acting coy all day long and showing off her right and wrong. She doesn't have the slightest bit of a servant girl's duty. Causing the entire household to be in a foul atmosphere. Hurry and come. Immediately drag her away. Even if you want to sell her or beat her to death, make her disappear from my sight immediately. Don't disgust me. Chang Zai immediately jumped out tactfully. With a wave of his hand, he instructed 2 manservants to go up and twist Dongha's arm. Chapter 572. Old Madam was so infuriated that her chest heaved up and down repeatedly. She pointed at Arbor and said, "You," for a long time, but she couldn't utter a complete sentence. Her eyes were so furious that they were about to spit out flames. "What right do you have to sell me? What right do you have to sell me? I'm old madam's person." Dong He's arms were twisted by the 2 manservants, and her eyes couldn't help but widen as she struggled non-stop. Her head of jewelry and jade shook, and her disheveled appearance cut a sorry figure. Arbor's bellyful of anger instantly exploded, and he fiercely kicked that last Dong He, sending her flying out from the 2 manservants' hands. She fell to the ground fiercely, and her head knocked against the thick stone slab, instantly creating a bloody hole. The surroundings were dead silent. All the servants stared at the enraged eldest miss with fear and trepidation. They only felt as if their hearts were gripped by a giant palm, and they were so frightened that they were somewhat unable to breathe. "What right do I have to sell you?" Arbor shouted sternly, then turned to Steward Chang Zai and roared, "Go and bring her indenture contract here. Immediately." "Yes, yes, yes." Chang Zai hurriedly signaled to the manservants with his eyes. The group of people swiftly rushed to Longevity Court. Since she said she was old madam's person, then the indenture contract must be in Longevity Court. Old Madam looked on helplessly as that group of manservants accepted Arbor's order without any moral integrity and openly ran to her court to search for the indenture contract. She was so angry that her chest kept panting, and she was almost unable to breathe. Not a moment later, a few quick-witted manservants dug out the indenture contract, and a thin stack was handed over to eldest Mississippi. "Do you see this? Your indenture contract is now in my hands. If I want you to live, you'll live. If I want you to die, you'll die for me." Arbor waved the slave contract in his hand, scaring Dongha, who was curled up on the ground, to the point that she scrambled to the old lady's side and cried, "Old lady, save me, old lady, save me." That was a weeping pear blossom bathed in the rain, her coquettish eyes brimming with charm. That last Dongha's entire body was trembling. Seeing that old madam was panting heavily without making a sound, she looked up in Xiao Zhongbang's direction and crawled towards him while crying. "Master, master, save me." He knew that the old lady was up to no good again. This Dong He, judging from her enchanting appearance, was definitely someone who wasn't content with her marriage. Most likely, the matriarch had even promised her that if she found an opportunity, she might even promote her to be her father's bed warmer. Xiao Sen was ruined by you demons. Arbor stepped forward and stomped on Dong He's back, directly making her lie there and unable to move. Drag her out, flog her 30 times, and immediately sell her. From now on, this will be the outcome of whoever dares to talk nonsense again. Arbor said coldly as he ruthlessly stomped on Dong He's back with his small foot. Dong He howled as she was dragged out. She never expected that she would become a part of the play when she only came to watch the show. Old Madam was so angry that she sat paralyzed on the ground. She pounded the ground and wailed, "My descendants are unworthy. My descendants are unworthy." Ah, I'm already so old, but I'm being humiliated by my granddaughter like this. I can't live anymore. I can't live anymore. As he spoke, he patted his chest and gasped for breath. Xiao Zhongbang awkwardly glanced at the crown prince, who was sitting calmly on the side. A pitch-black shadow had appeared at the crown prince's side at some point in time, and Huifeng followed him like a shadow. The crown prince secretly sent him a look, and Huifeng understood and left after receiving the order. Chapter 573. This was truly a farce. His mother had only stopped for a short while, so why did she start making a fuss again as soon as eldest miss returned? She clearly knew that his eldest miss wasn't someone who was easy to bully. This old lady. Xiao Zhongbang couldn't help but rub his aching head, secretly blaming his mother for being so meddlesome. He had already investigated the matter of his younger son being beaten. It was indeed due to his parents' negligence in disciplining him that he deserved to be beaten and punished. He had originally intended to personally make a trip to Sir Ren's residence tomorrow to apologize to him. What the hell is this old lady doing? She rushed over to rebuke his eldest miss just because a servant girl made a fuss in front of her. This was truly vexing. If it weren't for someone instigating them, no one would have thought of informing old madam today. Why would she come over on her own? Xiao Zhongbang wasn't a fool and connected the dots after thinking carefully. Wasn't this purely for His Highness the Crown Prince to see a joke with such a ruckus at home? Xiao Zhongbang sneaked a glance at the Crown Prince. Seeing that the Crown Prince had a calm expression and didn't say much, he couldn't help but relax slightly. After Huifeng left to carry out his orders, the Crown Prince sneered inwardly. That servant girl called Dong something was extremely audacious and actually angered his darling Xiao so much that her face flushed red. As such, she still wanted to smoothly report to the broker house after leaving the Xiao estate. Dong he didn't know that her fate was already sealed. After being punished with 30 whips, she was thrown at the door like a rag, waiting for the broker house's people to come and take her away. She was full of resentment and indignation as she cursed, so what if the Qiao estate's eldest miss is great? So what if the crown princess is great? One day, I will avenge today's grievances. Just you wait. MMPH. The two servants disliked her and directly stuffed her mouth with a rag. Mother, please get up first. Wei Ziqin sat still with a cold expression, but Xiao Zhongbang couldn't sit still anymore. He couldn't possibly watch his mother sit on the ground like a village woman and make a scene in front of the crown prince. You unfilial son. The old lady slapped Xiao Zhongbang in the face. A few years ago, Xiao Zhongbang's sincere heart was almost obliterated by Laonyang. Now, his heart had long since cooled down, so naturally, it would not hurt anymore. On the other hand, second uncle Xiao Zhongxing was enraged. He stood up with a whoosh and said angrily, Mother. What are you doing? Have you had enough? You guys, why aren't you helping old madam back to longevity court? Ah, the son is unfilial and the daughter-in-law is unvirtuous. Ah, his descendants are unworthy. What's the point of me living? Just let me die. The old lady howled, wailing to the heavens. Xiao Zhongbang got up quietly and ignored her. Arbor coldly glanced at the old lady. Suddenly, he flipped his hand and took out a small bottle of liquid medicine from his inner world. He slowly walked over to the old lady and handed it over. Here, drink it. The old lady's eyes widened as she looked at him. Her lips involuntarily trembled. What is this? Poison. Drink a mouthful, and I guarantee that you'll die thoroughly. The old lady's face drained of color as she raised her head. Everyone in the courtyard was even more silent. They pursed their lips and didn't make a sound. The entire front hall was filled with a terrifying silence. Do you need me to find someone to wait on you? Arbor asked coldly. You. The old lady was also a coward. When Arbor was fierce to her, she became somewhat listless. Looking into Arbor's emotionless eyes, her entire body couldn't help but tremble. Today, it ended at 10 p.m. Next week, 6 p.m. Chapter 574. Elderly lady stared blankly for a moment, then she started to throw a tantrum, rolling on the floor, and bawling loudly. The son is unfilial, and the daughter-in-law is unvirtuous, ah. You're going to drive this old woman to death. Ah. Ah. Arbor looked on coldly from the sidelines, not saying a word. Her beautiful eyes were filled with ridicule as she stared at elderly lady. However, right at this moment, a manservant guarding the door rushed in and bowed. Master, madam, second master. There's a group of people at the door, claiming to be third master's family, and they insist on barging in. We don't know their identities, so we've been temporarily blocked outside. When elderly lady heard the words, third master, it was as if her ears had been pricked. She instantly stopped throwing tantrums and raised her head to shriek, it's Zhongheng, Zhongheng's family is here. I want to see them. Zhongheng, Zhongheng, my poor child. You're here to save your old mother. Wei Ziqin stood up and pulled the two children to the side, not bothering to pay attention to this wailing old woman. She was about to be annoyed to death by this old woman. She would bring Shaoxin to her side every 2 to 3 days to raise him, but she didn't raise him well and spoiled him until he was full of bad habits. Every time she wanted to teach her son a lesson, this old woman would hurriedly protect him, not allowing her to hit or scold him. Look at what kind of child they've raised. If it weren't for her eldest daughter making such a scene today, she wouldn't have known that this little rascal actually bullied others outside. He deserved a beating. When she returned, she would have his father fiercely scold him. She had to make this child remember this lesson. At this moment, Wei Ziqin saw that elderly lady was throwing a tantrum, so she hurriedly handed the two half-grown children to the old mama beside her. Nanny Li, take the two young ladies and young master back to their rooms first. This place was truly too noisy. She didn't want her children to see this old woman's tantrum and learn from her in the future. Yes. Mother. Xiao Lin still wanted to stay and watch the show, but her mother glared at her. Go back. Young ladies could learn anything, but learning how to throw tantrums and roll on the ground like this old woman was truly too uncultured. Oh. Xiao Lin pouted. Nanny Li held her hand and dragged Shaoxin away. The two children were taken away. At this moment, the two servants at the entrance were beaten up and forced their way in. Although Qiao Zhongheng was thin and weak, the muscles on his arms were bulging. It was obvious that he was a strength-type superhuman. Relying on his own strength, he rushed through the door at lightning speed and took the lead to barge into the Marquis' manor. Behind him, his wife and children, as well as Granny Nyo's family, followed. With the help of Granny Nyo's strong and healthy sons, Qiao Zhongheng and his entourage swept away 1,000 troops along the way, beating up all the manservants of the Qiao estate until they were looking for their teeth on the ground. The group of people dashed straight to the antechamber and stared at the large Marquis' mansion, as well as Qiao Zhongbang's family's bright and beautiful appearance. Their eyes were red with jealousy. Heavens, what kind of life did they have on this journey? What kind of life did the first branch of the Qiao family have? Qiao Zhongheng never expected that his honest and wooden eldest brother, who was the most disliked by his mother, would actually achieve meteoric success today and be conferred the title of Marquis by the great king. Su Jiao's eyes were sharp, and she spotted Granny Nei Wang, who was lying on the ground. Wailing to the heavens and wailing, she rushed forward and hugged her mother, bawling her eyes out. Mother! My dear mother! This daughter-in-law has finally found you. Mother, mother, mother! Elderly lady almost fainted from Su Jiao's wailing. Chapter 575. In addition, Su Jiao's filthy and stinky body carried her over. The stench assailed the nostrils as soon as she opened her mouth, and old madam almost fainted from nausea. Xiaoyan wanted to go up and help old madam up, but Su Jiao forcefully brushed her aside. She hugged old madam tightly and refused to let go, as if she had caught a life-saving straw. Su Jiao hugged old madam tightly and glared at everyone like a tiger eyeing its prey. Old madam had lived like a princess these past few years. Now that Su Jiao was strangling her with a stinky body, old madam was about to be strangled to death. Mother! Your son is unfilial. You took so long to find mother. Xiao Zhongheng rushed over and knelt in front of his mother to cry. When old madam saw her son's shriveled appearance, grief welled up from her heart. She reached out to hold Xiao Zhongheng's hands as tears streamed down her face. Xiao Long, hurry up and greet grandmother. Kowtow to grandmother, Su Jiao berated her son. Xiao Long hurriedly went up and cried, Grandmother. The family of three gathered around old madam and cried fiercely. Old madam didn't despise Xiao Long for being filthy. Looking at her plump grandson who had become as thin as a shriveled green bean, her heart ached so much that she almost fainted. When this large family rushed in, Arbor had already ordered people to close the main door. Although there weren't many people on Minshan Avenue, no one in the Qiao estate was willing to perform a drama with the main door open. Great, now that the three generations had performed a great show together, it was Granny Niu who impatiently kicked Su Jiao's leg from the side, which made Su Jiao, who was still weeping bitterly, come back to her senses. Mother, how have you been these years? Su Jiao pretended to wipe her tears as she stole a glance at her sisters-in-law sitting on the side. The moment he saw this, he was immediately filled with anger. Wei Zichin's face was fair and delicate, with only a few faint wrinkles at the corners of her eyes. She wore a lotus-colored jacket embroidered with peonies, paired with a flower-sprinkled pleated skirt of the same color. She looked like a rich and noble person. The most hateful thing was that Wei Zichin had been sitting there without batting an eyelid from the beginning until now. No matter how Xiao Zhongheng's family of three kicked up a fuss, she didn't say a word for a long time. This behavior infuriated Su Jiao into gnashing her teeth. In the past, when she was at home, she was the most popular in front of the old lady. In terms of food and clothing, how could Wei Zichin compare with her? But now, her family of three was like beggars begging on the streets, while Wei Zichin had been gloriously promoted to the Grand Marquis Estate's madam. She was dressed in silks and satins, and she was also eating exotic delicacies. This disparity was so great that it made Su Jiao's entire heart twist fiercely. The son is unfilial and the daughter-in-law is not virtuous. When the old lady heard her youngest daughter-in-law's question, she immediately cried again. Xiao Zhongbang seemed to be energized as he sprang to his feet and immediately reprimanded Xiao Zhongbang. Eldest brother, how can you be so unfilial? Look at how angry mother is. Have you taken good care of mother all these years? I told you that mother can't do without me to take care of her. Su Jiao squeezed out 2 drops of tears and said bitterly, Mother, how about letting your daughter-in-law and eldest grandson take care of you in the future? Okay. Elderly lady repeatedly agreed. But will eldest brother and the others welcome us? Su Jiao deliberately asked, and the corner of her eye twitched as she instigated Wei Zichin with a glance. He dares not to welcome us. Elderly lady immediately roared with vigor, we're all brothers of the same family, blood-related brothers who won't leave even if they're beaten to death. If he can bear to part with that face, he'll chase you all out along with this old lady. Chapter 576. Wei Zichin felt as if she had swallowed a fly. All these years, she had attended to this old woman in the morning and at night. Every time old madam was sick or in pain, she would stay by her bedside to take care of her, but she had never received a word of praise. Now, she was constantly saying that her son was unfilial and her daughter-in-law was unvirtuous. She was so aggrieved that her eyes reddened. This old woman didn't ask anything and just made the decision to let Xiao Zhongheng's family of 3 move in. Arbor sat next to his mother and held her hand as he gazed at her comfortingly. He said softly, "Mom, don't worry, I won't give them the chance to get involved." Wei Ziqin immediately patted her daughter. Although her eyes were red, her voice was resolute. "Don't worry about this matter. Mom won't let them get what they want." She was now a legitimate third-rank marchioness personally conferred by the present emperor and had the title of noble lady. It was absolutely impossible for Su Jiao to bully her and use her as a stepping stone like before. Besides, she wasn't stupid. Looking at today's situation, not only was Su Jiao's family delusional about moving into the Marquis' estate, even Granny Nyo's family, who had nothing to do with them, wanted to move in and reap benefits. How could she allow these rat droppings to come in and cause a great disturbance in the Qiao estate? Since Mom said so, Arbor continued to sit and ignore the matter. He only rummaged through his storage talisman and took out an item, slapping it on the small table. Elderly lady turned her head when she heard the sound. When she saw the red paper on the table, she thought of something, and her eyelids suddenly twitched. As the mistress of the Marquis' estate, Wei Ziqin had already walked up and gazed coldly at Su Jiao, who was putting on a good show. "Third sister-in-law, don't drag old madam into acting. No matter what you say, your family of 3, along with Granny Nyo's family, can't move into the Marquis' estate. This is an estate bestowed by the present emperor, and not just anyone can live in it. You." Su Jiao had already aged quite a bit from being exposed to the elements, and her face was even darker from anger now. She vigorously shook old madam's hand that was supporting her. "Mother-in-law, look at what eldest sister-in-law is saying. She clearly doesn't want to acknowledge us as her relatives." Granny Qiao immediately trembled in anger. She turned around and pointed at Wei Ziqin as she cursed, "Vicious woman. Where do you want to send my son and grandson? You vicious woman. Do you believe that I will immediately ask Zhongbang to divorce you?" The head maidservant by Wei Ziqin's side, Chunying, was so angry that her face turned red. She had seen how madam treated old madam all these years. It was a good thing to be considerate. Which family's daughter-in-law could do this? Even a lowly servant like her couldn't stand it anymore. Old madam, she was really an ingrate. Arbor coldly glanced at Xiao Zhongheng's family, who were jumping up and down. He picked up the piece of paper and walked to old madam's side. He supported his mother and said, "Old madam, don't tell them that my mother is now a third-rank noble lady. She's also not someone that can be divorced just because some random person says so. I really don't believe what you're saying. Moreover, the family division document is written clearly. Do you want to look through it again and recall it?" Old Madame Qiao was so infuriated by Arbor's eccentric tone that she fell backwards on the spot. Su Jiao made a big fuss as she supported old madam. She turned her head and angrily rebuked Arbor, "Eldest young miss, is it? After not seeing you for a few years, your words have become even sharper and more unkind. There's no place for you to speak when the elders are talking here." Chapter 577. Arbor coldly glanced at Su Jiao, and a faint disdain surfaced on her stoic face. "With my current status, I'm sorry, but I really do have a place to talk." She suddenly wanted to ruthlessly bully others. What should she do? It wasn't good to bully others. But facing these greedy and hypocritical faces, she really didn't want to continue enduring. Why should she let her mother suffer in front of these people? Could it be that if they endured, these people would be willing to let their family off? Su Jiao's expression abruptly changed. On the side, Qiao Long couldn't take it anymore and roared, "You little bitch, you dare to speak to my mother like this?" He rushed up and aimed a slap at Arbor's small face. In the past, Qiao Long was the entire family's ancestor. Who dared to throw a tantrum at him? Now that he entered the eldest branch's Marquis' estate and saw that the eldest branch's family, who could only wear cotton clothes and live in a rundown house, were all well-fed and well-fed. He truly felt extremely unbalanced. In front of grandmother, he, Qiao Long, was the greatest ancestor. Even if he slapped this eldest cousin sister, she could only swallow her teeth and blood. However, her hand hadn't even touched a strand of Arbor's hair when her face suffered a heavy slap. Impudent! Mo Lien flashed to Arbor's side and pulled her into his embrace. He bellowed angrily, his expression abnormally furious. He really didn't know that when Xiao Qiao was in the village, she was bullied like this. This half-grown brat dared to lay a hand on his Jojo at this time. It was evident that he was used to being unruly at home and being violent. He truly had a lot of guts. Immediately afterwards, the main door abruptly opened, and several dozen guards armed with sabers and swords rushed in. They surrounded Granny Nyo's family and Xiao Zhongheng's family of 3, and their sabers and swords flickered as they uniformly pointed their sharp points at the deathly pale Xiao Zhongheng and company. Xiao Zhongheng and company all looked emaciated and bewildered, but under the direction of so many sabers and swords, they could only raise their hands in surrender. He Tian led his troops to kneel in salute with a solemn expression. This subordinate greets the crown prince and crown princess. This subordinate failed to protect his master. The crown princess was shocked. Please punish me, crown princess. Arbor shook his head and motioned for him to get up. The eyelids of Qiao Zhongheng and the others twitched violently. They all wore dumbfounded expressions as they stared blankly at Prince Mo and their eldest niece, who were surrounded by people. Crown Prince? Crown Princess? What was going on? After they entered the city, they were like headless flies, trying to find out the whereabouts of the Qiao estate. However, they couldn't tell them clearly. The person who gave them directions didn't have good intentions either. He directly pointed them to the Marquis of Jiayuan's estate and said that it was the largest Qiao estate in the city. That person saw that they were dressed in rags and looked like beggars. In fact, he was just joking with them and deliberately wanted to brush them off. Who would have thought that he would really point them in the right direction? When he saw that Xiao Zhongheng's family of 3 were really relatives of the Marquis of Jiayuan's estate, the person who had been leading the way to watch a good show was so scared that his legs turned to jelly, and he had long since slipped away. Xiao Zhongheng and company went straight to the Qiao estate as soon as they arrived, so they didn't find out what was going on at all. They only knew that his older brother had been promoted and made a fortune, silently becoming a marquis. Xiao Zhongheng was very envious and thought that he had to bring his wife and children to live in the marquis's estate no matter what. No matter what, he had to cling to his big brother. When the time came, he might even be able to become an official. Now that the situation had suddenly changed, Xiao Zhongheng's family was scared out of their wits. Chapter 578. He Tian's furious shout was heard. A bunch of unruly commoners. Why aren't you paying your respects to the crown prince and crown princess when you see her? The family, including Granny Nyo's family, hastily knelt down and trembled like quails, not daring to make a fuss. The entire estate immediately fell silent. Qiao Long was enraged, and just as he opened his mouth to curse, bitch, Mo Lien's icy gaze swept over, her pair of phoenix eyes exuding a baleful aura. Slap him. Don't. He's a child. A child is insensible and speaks without thinking, please forgive him, your highness the crown prince. Seeing a eunuch walking over with a wide mahogany board, Su Jiao was scared out of her wits and hastily went up to protect her son. Speaking without thinking at such an age, that's your lack of upbringing as parents. Let him go. Mo Lien coldly said, punish him with 10 boards. Remember this in the future. Su Jiao howled and wanted to pounce forward, but she was immediately dragged away by 2 vicious soldiers. She screamed with reddened eyes as she watched Qiao Long being dragged away by a soldier to the side. The eunuch used the wide board to slap her son's mouth repeatedly. Xiao Long had never suffered such humiliation in his life. His mouth was hit again and again, and after the 10 slaps, one of his teeth fell out. He roared with a mouth full of blood, "You little bitch, you really dared to hit me? Who do you think you are, you? You dared to treat me like this in front of grandmother? If I knew earlier, I would have strangled you to death back then." Su Jiao was so scared that her face was drained of color, and she frantically crawled towards her son while shrieking, "Xiao Long, shut up, shut up." Overwhelming fury surged in Mo Lian's eyes, and she raised her hand to shout angrily, "What are you still standing there for? You refused to mend your ways and spoke rudely against the crown princess. Drag them out and beat them to death." The Marquis of Jiayuan's estate instantly quieted down. However, that silence only lasted for a split second before it was immediately filled with Su Jiao's piercing wails. No. No. Su Jiao scrambled in front of Mo Lian and Arbor. She knelt and kowtowed, "Your Highness, please spare my life. Your Highness, please spare my life." When a child speaks without a filter, it is the foolish woman who has not been properly educated. When I return, I will definitely punish him severely and properly educate him. Your Highness, please spare his life. She looked up and saw Prince Mo pursing his lips and not saying a word. She quickly rolled over to Arbor, wanting to hug his leg. "Niece, miss, no, Crown Princess, Your Highness the Crown Princess. I beg you to spare your younger brother's life for the sake of the Qiao family's old master, who shares the same origin. I beg you, Crown Princess, Crown Princess." Arbor's face was cold. Mo Lian looked down at her and rubbed her head. She waved her hand impatiently and said, "Drag her out." 2 soldiers immediately dragged Xiao Long to the front yard. Su Jiao's vision darkened, and she repeatedly begged for mercy, her head banging against the ground. Granny Nyo and company were so frightened that they couldn't make a sound. The young lady kneeling behind Granny Nyo was around 15 or 16 years old. She secretly looked up at the enraged crown prince with an intoxicated expression. Was this the current crown prince? He was so young and handsome, and he also had so much power and influence. Wei Mingli's maiden heart thumped wildly, and she was practically unable to shift her gaze away. Look, such a hoodlum and scoundrel eldest brother Wei's family could only kneel in front of His Highness the Crown Prince, not daring to utter a single word. Madame Nei's son, who was kneeling next to Wei Mingli, quickly tugged at her daughter and had her quickly lower her head. Chapter 579. Madame Nei's son was timid. In front of the Crown Prince, she was alarmed and scared when she saw her daughter staring at that person's face without any etiquette. She was also worried that her daughter would be ignorant and cause trouble, so she quickly tugged at her to make her bow her head. Of her 3 daughters, 2 had starved to death, so she only had this one daughter left. Second young Master Wei had also died of illness 2 years ago, so the mother and daughter had to rely on the eldest branch to survive. They had already lived in fear and trepidation, so she didn't want to cause any more trouble now. How could she have known that a young girl's yearning for love was actually fantasizing about the Crown Prince at this very moment? Wei Mingli completely ignored Madame Nei's son's reminder as she stared fixedly at the Crown Prince. Her gaze was too sharp, so Arbor immediately looked over vigilantly. His cold and clear eyes swept over Wei Mingli as he said in displeasure, "Why do you keep staring at me?" Everyone. The Crown Prince's pursed lips turned up slightly. For some reason, he suddenly recalled coitus sex chi mei sorry state back then. His darling was as funny as ever. She always felt that the other girls' gazes were on her. Madame Nei's son was so terrified that she immediately pressed her daughter's head down. With a bang, Wei Mingli was forced to kowtow. Her eyes were filled with indignation and resentment as she forcefully pushed Madame Nei's son's hand away. She felt that Madame Nei's son was incompetent and made her lose face in front of everyone. She didn't even raise her head as she tightly clutched her skirt with both hands and bit her lip. Arbor felt bored and turned to look at Xiao Long, who had already been dragged to the front door. He saw that Xiao Long's hands were clinging tightly to the door, and he also knew fear now. His cries shook the heavens as he begged for mercy. Old Madam also didn't have the energy to make a fuss at this moment. She collapsed on the ground and shouted intermittently, "I'm going to be driven to death by my own granddaughter." Driven to death. Xiaoyun reached out in a panic, wishing that she could cover Old Madam's mouth. His Highness the Crown Prince was already in a thunderous rage, yet Old Madam still dared to howl here. Did she really think that His Highness wouldn't kill a shrew like her? Just now, Third Old Master and his family had insulted the Crown Princess. It wasn't as if they hadn't seen what happened to them. The Crown Prince doted on the eldest miss so much that he wouldn't let her suffer any grievances. The only reason His Highness was showing mercy to an old woman like her was probably because of the Marquis of Jiayuan and his wife. Old Madam slapped her knees and cried, "There's no place for us in this Marquis' estate. I can't stay in this Marquis' estate anymore. When you become an official, brothers and sisters will kill each other." Ah. What kind of sin did this old woman commit? I can't live anymore. Arbor suddenly pulled the Crown Prince's sleeve. The Crown Prince lowered his head and glanced at her. Seeing the impatience in her eyes, he immediately understood. He waved his hand and said, "Wait." The two soldiers then pulled Xiao Long over like a sack and threw him in front of the Crown Princess. Xiao Long's entire body trembled and he had already peed his pants in fright. When he fell to the ground, the smell of urine wafted out. Arbor reflexively shrank into Mo Lian's embrace and covered her mouth and nose with her sleeve, her eyes filled with disdain and contempt. "Old Madam, since you can't live in the Marquis' estate anymore, then this Crown Prince will permit you to leave the estate and live with the Qiao family's third branch. Come, each of the Qiao family's third branch will be punished with 30 planks. Throw Old Madam and the third branch out. In the future, they are not allowed to take half a step into the Marquis' estate. Violators will be beheaded." Chapter 580. When this verbal edict was passed down, it immediately caused the entire court to howl in anguish. Old Madam was even more dumbfounded. When did she sincerely want to leave the Marquis' estate? Where could she go to live such comfortable days after leaving the Marquis' estate? She had only casually howled a few times, how could it be taken for real? She had just moved from a small estate to such a large Marquis' estate and hadn't enjoyed enough of the good days, yet the Crown Prince actually issued a verbal edict for her to move out and live outside with her youngest son and daughter-in-law. How could she accept this? She wasn't leaving. Where could her old bones go? Seeing that Old Madam was about to shout, Su Jiao truly reacted quickly and used her dirty black hand to forcefully cover Old Madam's mouth. Only by bringing Old Madam along with her would she be able to stay connected to the eldest branch in the future. Otherwise, after being thrown out this time, how could she continue to maintain a relationship with the eldest branch in the future? Su Jiao wasn't stupid. On the contrary, she was very shrewd. She knew that as long as she held Xiao Zhongbang's mother in her hands, with that man's honest and considerate personality, there would be a day when he would give in. At that time, their third branch would definitely be able to return. Su Jiao pulled her son Xiao Long and her husband Xiao Zhongheng along as the family of three prostrated themselves on the ground and humbly kowtowed several times. Then, they were unceremoniously picked up by the soldiers and beaten 30 times each before being directly thrown out of the gate. Granny Nyo's eyes darted around, and she had just opened her mouth to call out, "Zichin. I'm a cow from the same village as you." But she was immediately swept over by the Crown Prince's cold gaze, and she was so frightened that she swallowed back her bellyful of words and knelt on the ground with weak limbs. Where did this idle person come from and make a fuss? Throw them out. The Crown Prince coldly reprimanded. Immediately, 7 or 8 soldiers swarmed over like tigers and wolves. Without any courtesy, they swung their clubs at Granny Nyo's family a few times. Dragging the group of people who were making a fuss, they directly shoved and threw them out of the main door, rolling together with Qiao Zhongheng's family of 3. Yo yo yo. Granny Nyo stroked her old waist and cried out in grief. Due to the crown prince's terror, she didn't dare to curse out loud and could only grumble in her heart. What an unlucky year. They originally wanted to follow Su Jiao's family into the Marquis' estate to enjoy themselves, but they didn't expect Su Jiao's family to be so incompetent that they actually angered the current crown prince and were directly swept out the door. Oh, Granny Nyo is so angry, so angry. Wei Mingli was screaming madly in her heart. She was a young lady in her late 20s, yet she had been grabbed and thrown out of the door by those ferocious soldiers just now. Her reputation had been swept to the ground, and there was nothing left of it. It really made her heart shatter into pieces, and it was unbearable. The cold-looking crown prince glanced over with a terrifying gaze, causing everyone present to shut their mouths. Wei Mingli's heart was restless, as if a cat had clawed at it. She cast a jealous and hateful glance at the Marquis' estate's tightly shut main door, her heart filled with unwillingness. Grandmother, are we just going to be kicked out of the house like this and not do anything? Wei Mingli twisted her sleeves and bit her lower lip, her words full of unwillingness. Her mother, Madame Sun, was shocked. She raised her hand and slapped her heavily on the back. You're asking for trouble. How dare you spout nonsense? You were truly too audacious just now. You actually dared to stare at His Highness like this? Aren't you afraid of angering His Highness and beheading you all at once? Oh, isn't it because the young lady's heart is rippling? TSK, shameless, shameless. Chapter 581. Don't tell me you're delusional enough to think that you can win His Highness's favor with your looks. Eldest brother Wei's wife, Madame Ne Bo, was fuming because she hadn't gotten anything good out of the Marquis' estate. When she heard Madame Ne Sun's words, she immediately mocked and ridiculed Madame Ne Sun and her daughter as usual. How could Wei Mingli suppress her anger? She pointed at Madame Ne Bo and shouted angrily, "What do you mean? What's wrong with my looks? Who am I ugly to look at? You look like a crooked date, yet you still dare to mock others. Don't worry about it." Madame Ne Bo flew into a rage, while Madame Ne Sun was so frightened that she kept quiet out of fear. She tugged at her daughter's clothes and urged her to shut up. You little bitch who doesn't know how to choose your words. Is this how you speak to your elders? How could Madame Ne Bo be trifled with? The second branch and their daughter had humbly relied on the eldest branch for a living all this while. Now, they actually dared to defy her authority. How could Madame Ne Bo tolerate this? She rushed forward and grabbed Wei Mingli's hair with her broad and fat body. Slap, slap. She slapped Wei Mingli's face twice. I'm hitting you for not knowing your manners. You little bitch, you still dare to take advantage of me. Ah! Wei Mingli only felt pain from Madame Ne Bo's fingernails scratching her left cheek. When she touched it, there was a trace of blood. She immediately felt angry, hateful, scared, and furious. Little bitch, you're delusional to think you can fly to the top. Why don't you look at your own face in the mirror? Only a blind man would fancy you. That's the high and mighty crown prince. Who do you think you are? Don't say that other people look down on you when you're the one who's cheap. Madame Ne Bo's mouth was as sharp and unkind as she could be, scolding Wei Mingli until she cried in anger. Madame Ne Sun was also clumsy with her words. She didn't dare to argue with Madame Ne Bo, so she pulled her daughter's hand and urged, all right. Don't talk so much. Don't quarrel with your eldest aunt. Wei Mingli only felt a chill in her heart. She abruptly flung Madame Ne Sun's hand away and screamed shrilly, "Get lost! Are you still my mother? Seeing your own daughter being bullied like this, you still have the face to persuade me not to say anything? It was that old woman who was scolding me. I hate you. I hate you. I hate you to death. Wei Mingli burst into tears. She turned around and ran like mad, disappearing in a short while. Madame Sun was so scared that she trembled all over. She licked her lips and begged Madame Bo, sister-in-law, don't be angry with a child. You see, it's our first time in the capital. There are many adults here. What if Mingli gets lost? Let's chase after her and look for her. If you want to find it, go find it yourself. That little bitch was just lustful. Why did she care about her? She might have wanted to leave us a long time ago and go out to find a random man. Madame Bo shook off Madame Sun's hand and looked at her with disdain. Madame Sun's face turned pale and her lips trembled, but she subconsciously did not dare to refute. What are you all arguing about? This was Minshun Avenue. At the place where the officials gathered. If there was nothing important, ordinary people were forbidden to stay here and make noise. Go, go, go. Everyone, leave quickly. The city guards who heard the news ran over and chased them away without a second word. Elderly lady howled and wanted to go up to bang on the Marquis estate's main gate, but Su Jiao grabbed her hand forcefully. Mother! Let's leave this place first. We can discuss this at length after we leave. The group of people came in high spirits and left dejectedly. Chapter 582. When she was escorted away from Minshun Boulevard by the city guards, elderly lady was still staring at the tightly shut doors of the Marquis' estate, unwilling to give up. Su Jiao didn't say anything and only turned her head to glance at the Marquis' estate's lintel, her eyes flickering with greed. She understood the eldest branch's husband and wife too well. They simply couldn't harden their hearts. She reckoned that in less than 3 days, Xiao Zhongbang and his wife would definitely be reluctant to part with their mother and come visit. This old fart was a bargaining chip in her hand. As long as she had this old fart, she could guarantee that the eldest branch's husband and wife would be docile and docile. So, how could she allow her mother to continue loitering in the Marquis' estate? Even if she had to seize her mother, she had to seize her mother to her side. Su Jiao snorted lightly and flung elderly lady's hand away after leaving the Marquis' estate. Their family of 3 had just been beaten, so they couldn't walk nimbly. Her son, Xiao Long, was even more miserable. Not only was his butt severely injured, his mouth was also nearly smashed with a bamboo plank. This made Su Jiao's heart ache, and she couldn't help but hate Arbor to death in her heart. That rotten little bitch. Relying on His Highness the Crown Prince's favor, she dared to torment her precious son like this. One day, she would make her taste the pain of being humiliated like this. Humph, a man's favor came and went quickly. That person was the Grand Crown Prince of the Mo Kingdom, second only to one and above all. Could it be that he could spend his days guarding a little bitch like you? There would definitely be a chance for her to fall out of favor. At that time, she would definitely make you pay with your blood. Elderly lady started to pant after walking a few steps. She had been pampered all these years and lived like a prince. If she wasn't in a palanquin, she would be in a sedan chair, so there was no need for her to walk. Su Jiao turned to glance at elderly lady and cursed this cursed old woman in her heart. However, she still put on a virtuous appearance and helped elderly lady to Granny Nyo's family's donkey cart. At this time, she still had to rely on this old woman. It would be fine when she returned to the Marquis' estate one day. Before Xiao Zhongbang and his wife came looking for her, she had to serve this old woman well and let this old woman know that she was a very filial person. It was just that this time, Su Jiao's scheme was probably going to fall through completely. Xiao Zhongbang had been disappointed in his mother over the years. He would never take the initiative to bring his mother back. Moreover, since the Crown Prince had given the order to move the Empress Dowager out of the Marquis' manor so that his third brother's family could be filial to her, he wasn't stupid enough to go with the flow. As for Wei Ziqin, she had long given up hope. She wished that the Empress Dowager would go far away and never disturb them again. At this time, Su Jiao still didn't know. Along with Qiao Zhongheng and his wife, they had been doing their best to show filial piety to this old lady along the way. They took care of every aspect, which comforted old Madame. He thought that even though his eldest and second sons were unfilial and he had been chased out of the Marquis's household by his descendants at an old age, at least he still had a filial youngest son and daughter-in-law. It couldn't be considered too bad. After the group of ragged beggars were escorted out of Minshan Boulevard, they looked at the people coming and going on the streets and practically didn't know where to go. They didn't have money, and they were almost out of grain. They didn't even have a place to stay at this time. What should they do? Qiao Zhongheng was already regretting it at this time. He thought that he should have bitterly begged to hug his eldest brother's thigh instead of acting like a big shot and acting like a tyrant. Chapter 583. As for Wei Mingli, after she impulsively ran away from Minshan Avenue, she ran madly along the road. As she ran, she started to regret it. The road ahead was boundless, and she didn't know where to go. Wei Mingli dazedly looked at the unfamiliar faces coming and going, and her footsteps gradually slowed down. Suddenly, she was knocked over by a passing carriage, and her entire body crookedly fell to the ground. She didn't feel the ice-cold ground in her impression, and instead threw herself into a warm embrace filled with ambergris. "Miss, are you all right?" A man's voice sounded beside her ear. Although it wasn't as magnetic and pleasant as His Highness the Crown Prince's, it was still passable. Wei Mingli looked up and met a pair of slightly swollen large eyes with thick eyebrows. The man's face wasn't the slightest bit handsome and could only be considered regular features. It truly couldn't compare to His Highness the Crown Prince, who had slightly raised phoenix eyes and a gorgeous appearance. Wei Mingli couldn't help but be taken aback. Why did she link everything to the Crown Prince? Her small face couldn't help but blush slightly. Could it be that she really was a young girl in love? "I've startled Mississippi," the man's gaze flickered as he looked at Wei Mingli, and he extended his hands to help her up from the ground. Wei Mingli was a bit embarrassed by the other party's scorching gaze. Although she came from the village, she was still a young lady in her late 20s. She was a bit shy from the man's gaze, and her neck drooped. Just as Granny Miao, Su Jiao, and the others were searching the streets for a place to stay, the Qiao family in the Marquis's estate finally had a harmonious and beautiful reunion dinner. Without the disturbance of unrelated people, everyone was in a cheerful mood, and the meal was very sumptuous. A little later, the Crown Prince took his leave and very naturally held the little fellow's small hand as they left the Qiao estate together. It was only after they boarded the carriage that Arbor rolled her eyes at him. She clearly didn't have to return to the palace, but this person insisted on bringing her along. This guy had completely let go at this time and didn't even avoid her younger brothers and sisters. He held hands whenever he wanted and hugged whenever he wanted. He truly did as he pleased. "You can do whatever you want in your own home." The Crown Prince smiled as he carried the little fellow onto his lap. He hugged her waist and whispered into her ear, "You must be tired after a long day. Do you want to sleep for a while?" Arbor felt his ears warm up and reached out to rub them. The Crown Prince let out a muffled laugh. He pulled down her little hand and helped her rub it. His gesture was very gentle. After he was done, he chuckled. "Your ears are itchy. What a bad person." Arbor turned his head and glared at him, but their faces were so close that when Arbor turned his head, his little mouth brushed past the corner of his mouth. It was as gentle as a feather, quietly plucking at his heartstrings. Our dear Qiao Mu's entire body froze. The Crown Prince wasn't any better than her. He stared at her in a daze, deep whirlpools churning in the depths of his eyes. The little fellow saw that the situation was not good, and wanted to run away after teasing him. He struggled on his knees, and was about to break free from his embrace and roll to the other side of the carriage. The Crown Prince scooped her back and fixed her on his lap. He lowered his head and exhaled a mouthful of cold medicinal power into her ear. Want to run? A certain person instantly realized that her little hands and feet were somewhat unable to move. A pair of watery eyes widened as she angrily glared at his face that was close to hers. This guy was an apothecary, so how could he carelessly use medicinal power on her? What kind of medicinal power was this? Chapter 584. Heavens! Why was the drug so strong? It made her feel weak all over, and she couldn't even lift her arms and legs. Arbor glared at him. Oh, you're definitely not convinced by using medicine like this. I'll let you use talismans on me first. The Crown Prince grinned as he pressed his face against hers and exhaled softly. The great Crown Princess was instantly revived. She took out a few talismans and pasted them all on the Crown Prince's forehead. The talismans floated around the Crown Prince's head. After a while, the Crown Prince burst out laughing. How annoying! These talismans were completely ineffective on him. In a fit of anger, Arbor reached out and circled his neck without thinking. She opened her mouth and bit his chin. She clearly felt the Crown Prince's body tense up, and her little mouth opened. His slender index finger caressed her little face, and he chuckled softly. You bit the wrong place, baby. Xiao Mu raised her head, and her small and round chin abruptly landed in his palm. She was just scratching her head in bewilderment when she suddenly felt her mouth being filled with warmth. In her daze, she heard the man chuckle lightly. Bite here, darling. Harder. Darling Xiao quivered and almost jumped up, her head hitting the roof of the carriage. Heh, but that was just a thought. Her entire body was weak from the effects of the medicine, and she couldn't lift her arms or legs at all. This bastard. What was he doing? Wasn't he kissing her? Being glared at by a pair of round eyes, the Crown Prince couldn't help but laugh and couldn't kiss her anymore. He scooped her into his arms. You keep staring at me. Do you still want to bite me? Here, I'll let you bite. Arbor. This baby suddenly doesn't want to talk to you anymore. If you don't want to talk, then I'll continue kissing my baby. The Crown Prince moved closer to her little mouth. Our dear Xiao Mu raised her hand and pressed it against his chest. Only then did she realize that she could move her arms and legs. Wah, this bad guy. One moment he could make her move, the next moment he made her unable to move. He was so annoying. She tugged at his long hair angrily. Didn't you say that it was just a title and nothing else? He revealed his wolf's tail so quickly. Wasn't he afraid that she would bite him? No. She couldn't bite him either. Once she did, he would take advantage of her. It's just a title. The Crown Prince looked at her innocently. After confirming their status, it was only natural for them to kiss, hug, and throw themselves at each other. You were the one who pounced on me and bit me. Do you still want to bite? Baby, I'll let you bite me whenever you want. Arbor. That does seem to be the case. Don't. Arbor looked at him speechlessly, his little stoic face unable to maintain a straight face. The Crown Prince was amused. He reached out to hug the little fellow and caressed her. He looked at her with a face full of regret. Next time, if you want to bite, just bite as much as you want. Don't hold it in, okay? I really don't want to talk to you anymore. By the way, baby, aren't you going to give me a gift in return? Mo Yen hugged his little body and shook it gently. Xiao Mu's watery eyes abruptly widened. What? Why was he giving a gift in return again? Just as she was thinking about when she owed that fellow a gift, he reached out and lifted her little chin. The two of them stared at each other, their gazes glued together. His slightly curved thin lips inched closer and closer to her face as her eyes widened. Something was wrong. Wasn't it just a title? Why were they kissing so frequently? This was only the first day of the betrothal. Whoosh, an arrow pierced through the air and suddenly streaked past her eyes, shattering the seductive atmosphere in the carriage. Chapter 585. The Crown Prince's gaze sharpened, and he took the opportunity to throw the little thing under his body to protect her. With a flick of his sleeve, the arrowhead was shattered into pieces. The countless arrows that followed were all blocked by the defensive barrier that he had set up. Whistling sounds came from outside. Tian's group of soldiers had already started fighting with the black-clothed men swarming in from all directions. Arbor lifted her little head from his embrace and saw that his thin lips were tightly pursed. His eyes were sharp, and his expression was tainted with a trace of killing intent. It was obvious that he was extremely furious. Mo Lien. She couldn't help but call out. The Crown Prince lowered his head and lightly pecked her pink, moist lips. Don't be afraid. Wait for me to kill them. A bunch of blind idiots. They actually dared to disturb his beautiful moment of tenderness with his wife in his arms. They all deserve to die. Arbor pursed her little lips and thought, how can you tell that this baby is afraid? As they spoke, another storm of arrows flew over like thunder, striking the defensive barrier with a pitter-patter. The entire carriage was covered by the defensive barrier. Other than the first arrow that passed through the curtain, the rest were blocked. The carriage was not damaged at all. Mo Lien couldn't help but feel a little gloomy. It was all his fault for being so engrossed in holding the little fellow that he didn't notice that someone had set up an ambush at Huabei Gate. At this moment, the commotion outside Huabei Gate had already alarmed a group of patrolling Imperial Guards. A large group of soldiers was rushing over at top speed. The Crown Prince tightly pursed his lips and scooped up the little fellow's body. He swiftly darted out of the carriage, and a fierce look flitted across his phoenix eyes. In an instant, all the hundreds and thousands of arrows that were shooting towards the two of them stopped in midair and started to vibrate slightly, along with a light gurgling sound. The hundreds and thousands of arrows abruptly turned around and flew towards the roofs where the ambush was set up. Ah! Ear-piercing screams continuously sounded, accompanied by black shadows falling from the roofs. Arbor turned to look at Tian and the others who were fighting with dozens of assassins. With a wave of her little hand, a handful of talismans appeared in her hand. The intermediate blue stun talisman was scattered in the wind. It was aimed at the group of black-clothed assassins. From the activation of the talisman to the stun, it was almost done in one breath. It was as if the man in black was drunk. His footsteps were unsteady as he swayed back and forth. He couldn't even hold the sword in his hand. When Tian and the others saw this, they immediately took the opportunity to kill the assassins. One of them saw that the situation was not good. He turned around and was about to escape. But, he was hit in the chest by a flame. Ah! He screamed. Then, he fell to the ground. His head heavily knocked on the thick stone floor. At this moment, the patrolling Imperial Guards had already arrived. When they saw that it was the Crown Prince who had been attacked, they were all scared out of their wits and knelt down to accept their punishment. Tian rushed over and knelt down on one knee. Your Highness, I have failed in my duty. I didn't notice the assassin's ambush. Mo Lien waved her hand at him and said, they've taken some medicine to hide their scent. Bring some people over to take a look and clean up the archers on the roof. Yes. Tian paused and asked, do you want to leave them alive? This prince knows who did it. Mo Lien curled her lips and shook her head noncommittally. Clean it up. Yes. Tian led a group of Imperial Guards to clean up the mess where the archers were lying in ambush. Mo Lien held Arbor's little hand and walked to the black-clothed man who was rolling on the ground and clutching his chest. Chapter 586. The two of them looked at each other, then walked up to the howling black-clothed man and looked at him coldly. With a flick of her finger, Xiao Mu took out a blue talisman and struck the person on the ground. After the blue light flashed past, the man suddenly quivered and fell silent. "Who sent you to assassinate me?" Arbor asked coldly. The assassin rolled on the ground and opened his mouth to say, "Tu." Xiao Mu instantly felt her body lighten. Mo Yen reacted extremely quickly and tossed out a ball of fire that enveloped the assassin's entire body. At the same time, Xiao Qiao, who was hugging him, swiftly retreated backwards. Boom! The assassin suddenly self-destructed in the circle of fire that Mo Yen had set up. What happened? Arbor's eyes widened. She turned to look at Mo Yen, whose face was solemn and body tense. Mo Yen hugged the little girl and patted her back. She said softly, "It's okay." Arbor was confused. Why would my dictum talisman make him self-destruct? The dictum talisman was from the fourth jade slip of the golden talisman jade tome, just like the Vajra talisman and the invisibility talisman. With a single dictum talisman, anyone with a lower cultivation level than her would obediently speak the truth. That was why she had used the dictum talisman to ask about the assassin's identity. She didn't expect that the man would self-destruct. It has nothing to do with your talisman. Mo Yen hugged the little girl tightly and patted her back comfortingly. This person must have had a strand of his soul extracted and a hint planted in him. Anyone who tried to reveal the mastermind would be immediately detected and forced to self-destruct. So what did he mean by "tu"? Arbor believed that her hearing was good. She had heard the word that the black-clothed man had spat out clearly. Mo Yen curled his lips, and he whispered into her ear. At this time, He Tian and the others who were attracted by the huge explosion hurriedly turned back. When he saw that his two masters were unharmed, He Tian heaved a sigh of relief. In his heart, he cursed the 18 generations of the assassin's ancestors. Why did he have to stir up trouble? Couldn't he just stop for a while? The news of the crown prince being attacked at Huabei Gate quickly spread to the ears of the great king, the queen, and the other concubines of the imperial harem. They all sent people to express their condolences. The great king and queen summoned the crown prince for questioning that very night. Xiao Mu naturally didn't join in the fun. After Mo Yen sent her back to the eastern palace, she washed up and climbed into bed. At this time, the great king and queen summoned the crown prince into the main hall. They looked at him carefully before asking, "Who tried to assassinate you? Do you know? Your humble servant failed to protect you. Please punish me, great king." He Tian stepped forward and knelt down to beg for forgiveness. He Tian did not neglect his duty. "It was my son's carelessness," the crown prince said calmly. The queen glared at her son somewhat angrily and turned to ask He Tian, "Did you find out where the assassins came from?" He Tian immediately looked like he wanted to say something, but stopped himself. The great king said angrily, "What are you stopping yourself for? Speak." "Your Majesty, great king and queen, please forgive me. Your humble servant found this on the assassin's body, but your humble servant didn't dare to say." He Tian presented a crescent-shaped jade pendant with both hands. The great king snatched the jade pendant from him and suddenly became furious. "Guards! Go and invite noble Consort Lin and the third prince here." Mo Yen's expression was leisurely. When Queen Zhao saw this, she became angry again. She pulled her son and said, "Imperial mother heard everything. Today's incident happened because you accompanied that girl from the Qiao family back to her maternal home." Chapter 587. When Mo Yen heard this, he was immediately unhappy with his mother's disdainful tone. "Imperial mother, what Qiao family's lass? That's your son's daughter-in-law. The crown princess that imperial father personally conferred upon her." The great king's mouth twitched at the side. He hated that he couldn't go up and give this son a slap on the back of his head. He was such a swindling brat all the time. Was he willing to issue this imperial edict? Ah! That was because he was threatened and forced. That day, the words that this damned son said to him in the imperial study, if he said it out loud, his mother would be angered to death. On account of their relationship as husband and wife, he was too embarrassed to tell Queen Zhao that her son was such a swindling person. In the end, the great king was infuriated when Queen Zhao received the news early this morning. She rushed to his study and angrily scolded him. At this moment, the great king was still suppressing a bellyful of anger. He didn't have a single day of rest. Was this something that couldn't be said? She only said one sentence about that Xiao family's lass, and her son immediately jumped out to defend her. The queen's long, shapely eyebrows shot up as she jabbed her son's forehead with a finger. Mother hasn't said anything about you yet. You and your imperial father rashly issued an imperial edict to that Xiao family's lass. Do you still have me, your mother, in your eyes? Queen Zhao was really about to be angered to death. On her end, she had been very enthusiastic and had been helping the crown prince choose the young misses from various manors. Alright, on this end, her husband and son didn't say anything. An imperial edict came out of nowhere and directly decided on the crown prince's consort at lightning speed. The key point was that she had never seen this crown princess from beginning to end. She also didn't know what her character was like. In her heart, she had two good candidates for the crown princess that she liked. Now, it was all ruined by this father and son pair. Imperial mother, your son naturally respects you very much in his heart. Mo Yen was all smiles as he helped his mother to the side to sit down. But your son's daughter-in-law is also very, more, important. If your son can't marry this daughter-in-law, your son will have to be a bachelor for the rest of his life. The great king picked up a book and threw it at the back of the crown prince's head. This unfilial son. He really dared to shoot his mouth off in front of his mother. He did not even mention such shameless words in front of his queen. As expected, Queen Zhao widened her eyes in shock. She looked her son up and down, as if she wanted to see if he was telling the truth or not. Mo Yen tilted his head and dodged the book that his father threw at him. He looked at his mother innocently. Queen Zhao saw that his expression was exceptionally serious, and she was completely curious about that girl from the Qiao family. In Queen Zhao's heart, her son was the most outstanding child in the entire kingdom. There was no girl in the world who could match up to her outstanding son. In the past 20 years, he had never seen him care so much about any woman around him. This crown princess, not to mention that his son had begged for her, why was he so protective of her? How curious. In short, you put yourself in danger for that girl from the Qiao family. Mother is not happy. Queen Zhao said in dissatisfaction, tomorrow night at the palace banquet, you should let mother see that good wife of yours, right? Mo Yen nodded and supported Queen Zhao as she said, Mother, my wife is still young. When the time comes, don't scare her. Your son only has this one daughter-in-law. If you scare her away, your son will have to be a bachelor for the rest of his life. Queen Zhao was both anxious and angry. She jabbed her son fiercely. You child, you talk nonsense all day long. The great king also glared at the crown prince in annoyance. Just then, they heard an announcement from outside. Great king, noble consort Lin and the third prince have arrived. Tell them to get their asses in here. The great king roared angrily. Chapter 588. A woman dressed in a gold-embroidered brocade jacket and a lily-colored dress, who was close to 50 but had maintained herself well, was currently gracefully walking into the main hall. Behind her was a man in his late 20s, wearing an azure robe. His long hair was tied up high, and he could be considered fair and clean. This concubine greets the great king. Greetings to the queen. You raised a good son. Without another word, the great king picked up an inkstone and smashed it at noble Consort Lin's head. Noble Consort Lin immediately turned pale with fright. She abruptly prostrated herself on the ground and trembled as she asked, "May I know why the great king is so angry?" Smack! The inkstone smashed at noble Consort Lin's feet, scaring her so much that she paled. "You still have the face to ask us?" The great king paced back and forth on the steps, stamping with rage as he said, "Why don't you go ask your good son?" Third son Mo Ting immediately knelt down and repeatedly cried out for injustice, "Royal father, royal father. What exactly did son do? Why are you treating royal mother like this? Is this yours?" The great king picked up the crescent-shaped jade pendant from the table and threw it at Mo Ting's face with a smack. "We remember that this was a present your royal mother gave you in public on your 10th birthday. Is this the one? It's even engraved with your Ting character on the back." Mo Ting's face was filled with panic as he hurriedly cried out, "Royal father, why is this jade pendant here? I already lost this jade pendant 2 days ago. Royal father is wise. How could the great king believe his nonsense?" He stepped forward and kicked his son to the ground. "You disgraceful thing. Of all times, it fell on the assassin who tried to assassinate your 6th brother. Do you think we're easy to fool?" Mo Ting's eyes widened in horror. He naturally also received news of the crown prince's assassination attempt at Huabei Gate, and at that time, he even rejoiced in his misfortune in the palace. He didn't expect that this inexplicable fire would burn him all of a sudden. What was going on? He didn't do anything. This jade pendant really had already disappeared 3 days ago. How would he know how this jade pendant would appear at the scene of the crown prince's assassination attempt? Someone must have framed him. "Father." The unlucky Prince Mo Ting shuffled a few steps on his knees and hugged the old great king's thigh with tears streaming down his face. He cried bitterly, "It's really not a son. Your son can swear to the heavens that if I really send someone to assassinate 6th brother, I will be struck by lightning and die a horrible death. Imperial father, think about it. If it was really his son who sent someone to assassinate his 6th brother, how could he leave such evidence at the scene? Ah, Imperial father. You have to believe me. I have never done such a thing." The crown prince glanced at the unlucky 3rd prince and sighed. "Father, I also believe that this matter was not done by 3rd prince." The 3rd prince Mo Ting simply couldn't believe his ears. His younger brother, the crown prince, who was rumored to be like a spring breeze on the outside but was actually extremely cold and heartless on the inside, was actually pleading for him today. The old great king kept a straight face, a hint of disdain hanging from the corner of his mouth. He moved his leg and pulled it out of Mo Ting's embrace. "There's no proof for this matter. I will send people to investigate thoroughly. From today onwards, stay in the 3rd prince's estate and don't come out until the truth comes to light." Noble Consort Lin immediately collapsed to the ground and repeatedly cried, "Your Majesty, the 3rd prince is innocent, Your Majesty. Your Majesty." The great king didn't want to listen anymore and instead angrily rebuked noble Consort Lin, "You're also grounded for 3 days. Properly reflect on what kind of son you taught." Chapter 589. When the pitiful 3rd prince was chased out of the main hall by the great king, he only felt the cold wind blow by, and his body also shivered. The crown prince followed him out and sighed as he looked at him. "3rd royal brother, I believe you, but royal father won't listen to me either." When he saw that jade pendant, he insisted that it was 3rd royal brother who did it. 6th brother. The 3rd prince abruptly turned his head, wishing he could grab the crown prince's hand and pour out his heart. However, the crown prince raised his fist to his lips and pretended to cough twice, avoiding the 3rd prince's enthusiastic claws. "6th brother, you really have to believe me. I can swear an oath to the heavens. Mo Ting stuck out 2 fingers and swore. All right, third royal brother, of course I believe you. The crown prince hastily interrupted his string of swearing, cursing him inwardly for being annoying. Can't you let me finish speaking? This idiot. He's so stupid that he doesn't even know how to refute and only knows how to swear. What's the use of that? No wonder he was framed. Noble Consort Lin wiped her tears and said, Your Highness Crown Prince, I hope you can investigate clearly. Teng is devoted to your highness and definitely wouldn't do such a disobedient and immoral thing. Speaking of which, third royal brother was too careless. How could such a personal jade pendant fall into the hands of someone with intentions? Mo Lien sighed and glanced at Mo Teng. Actually, I originally had a very suspicious target in my heart. I could have mentioned it in front of royal father, but something like this happened to third royal brother. Mo Teng's ears twitched, and he hastily lowered his voice to ask, Sixth brother, who do you suspect? Tell older brother in private so that older brother can have an idea. You also know that older brother isn't very astute and is easily confused. Heh, why don't I say you're stupid, the crown prince ridiculed in his heart. However, he was all smiles on the surface. The crown prince also lowered his voice. The 2 brothers leaned their heads together and whispered, Third royal brother, actually, I feel that second royal brother is extremely suspicious. I also have a clue in my hands that points to him. Who knew that third royal brother's jade pendant would fall at the scene of the assassination? I can't help you explain yourself to imperial father. Mo Ting's face instantly turned green, and he smacked his thigh as if he had thought of something. He hurriedly said to the crown prince, Sixth brother, elder brother thought of something, so I'll return to the estate first. Watching noble Consort Lin and the third prince Mo Lien leave in a huff, Mo Lien muttered to herself, Who has the time to play this kind of little game with you? He didn't even have time to accompany his wife. This bunch of crooked melons and cracked dates, looking for trouble for him. Humph, he'll just let them fight amongst themselves. Your Highness, is the second prince planning to do something? Hui Feng whispered as he followed behind the crown prince. Why not? I let him assassinate me for nothing. Our dear Mo Lien was filled with anger when he recalled the seductive scene that was interrupted inside the carriage. Seriously, this second prince was tired of living. Since he dared to play assassination with him, then he'll find more people to play with him to his heart's content. Didn't you say a while ago that a downtrodden royal grandson of West Chiu Kingdom fled to the second prince's estate? The crown prince waved his hand at Hui Feng and instructed him. Hui Feng's mouth twitched, and he nodded repeatedly before leaving to carry out the order. His master was digging a grave for his second highness. But who told his second highness to be so blind? Your second highness, you're on your own. Chapter 590. Second brother, do you know the consequences of provoking this crown prince? Prince Mo sneered. After walking slowly for a while, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. His expression froze for a moment, and his figure flashed as he rushed toward the eastern palace. She hadn't entered Paradise Planet to take a look for several days. Ever since that day she tracked the poison-tailed butterflies and got rid of a poison master, she had Sapling move all the poison-tailed butterflies into Paradise Planet. Now that she wanted to take a look, she had Sapling bring her into Paradise Planet. Chiu had specially opened up a separate poison garden for her, and even moved some of the poisonous flowers and herbs in the original medicinal field into that poison garden, completely separating it from the medicinal field. Now that she was strolling in the poison garden, she saw a group of colorful poison-tailed butterflies fluttering in the medicinal field. An enormous black shadow suddenly descended, flapping its wings as it flew toward her. Looking closely, the giant butterfly in front of her had already transformed into a human, with a pair of long and beautiful dark blue wings on its back. In the middle was the figure of a little loli. This was the strange creature that had swooped down from the sky when she wanted to leave the Poison Master's courtyard that day. The queen of the poison-tailed butterflies had named her Xiao Xiao. Speaking of which, that pygmy poison master probably couldn't find peace in the underworld. The poison-tailed butterflies that he had nurtured his entire life were all taken in by this little fellow for her own use. The most interesting thing was that before he died, he didn't even get to see the poison-tailed butterfly queen. After the poison-tailed butterfly queen broke out of its cocoon, it happily pounced on classmate Arbor, directly acknowledging him as its master. Arbor thought that pygmy would probably cry injustice to the king of hell when he entered the underworld. Tilting his little head, Arbor waved at Xiao Xiao, who was fluttering her wings. Xiao Xiao happily shrunk her figure, turning into a butterfly as thick as a finger, and fluttered into Arbor's hand. She cutely called out, "Master, Master, you've come to see me." "That's right. How are you and your little friend staying? This place is great. The mystic energy is rich, and we're free. It's too suitable for us to live in." Xiao Xiao happily fluttered her wings. "That's good." Arbor knew that her paradise planet was a good place to live, and the little fellows definitely wouldn't be dissatisfied. She was just asking casually. She stroked Xiao Xiao's wings. "Xiao Xiao, send some butterflies out with me. I want them to go somewhere to scout for information." "Yes, master." With a wave of Xiao Xiao's hand, 3 small black butterflies fluttered up to Qiao Mu, fluttering up and down. "Master, Xiao 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 Xiao, master," she said. "If there's anything you need, just tell them and they'll do it." Xiao 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 Xiao. Xiao Mu nodded. Although her small stoic face was expressionless, the sapling Qiu could tell that its little master was still very happy. "Master, master, I can also go out. I can also work for you." The water child dashed over and bounced several times in front of Qiao Mu. "No need. It's just a small matter. You can all stay here." "Wah, master, you'd better go out quickly. I can feel the crown prince's aura spreading over. He seems to be very angry," Qiu said suddenly. Chapter 591. Xiao Xiao, I'll bring them out now. Remember to send me feedback from time to time. Arbor hurriedly had Qiu send her out. Almost at the same time, she felt the crown prince's raging aura approach. With a whoosh, his figure landed in the bedchamber. He panicked. He hurried all the way back. But when he entered the Eastern Palace and saw the slender figure, he was clearly stunned. He looked her up and down in a daze. His entire heart seemed to settle down, and his expression relaxed slightly. "Where did you go just now?" Mo Yen appeared beside her in a flash and pulled her into his embrace. Qiao Mu blinked her eyes. I'm telling you, if you disappear without a word like this again, I'll tie you to my side one day and not allow you to leave my side." Mo Yen lowered his head and was about to bite the little fellow's mouth. Our dear Qiao Mu hurriedly reached out a small paw to block his lips and silently communicated with the sapling. "Can you bring Mo Yen into Paradise Planet now?" "No, no. Last time, Qiu was almost exhausted from bringing in so many living creatures from the outside world. The Crown Prince is such a big person. Let's wait a while." Arbor's eyes curved suspiciously. "Only one person. Last time, you brought in so many butterflies, but they were fine. Other than Master, living people are the hardest to bring in. It's another matter if they're dead." Scram. "Who are you talking about dying?" Arbor's beautiful brows immediately furrowed. No, I didn't say anything. The Crown Prince's cultivation is so high, how could anything happen to him? Wow, Master is so scary." She quickly smoothed things over. "Actually, Master, as long as your cultivation increases, it won't be so difficult to bring in living creatures in the future." Qiu immediately said fawningly. "I believe in Master. It won't take long for you to have a big breakthrough. In Paradise Planet, Butterfly Queen Xiao Xiao looked at the fawning Treant with disdain. She unhappily flapped her wings and returned to her poison garden. Why aren't you saying anything? The Crown Prince reached out and held her small chin. His eyes were slightly suspicious as he looked at the silent little fellow in front of him. You disappeared just now. For a moment, just like 2 years ago, he could no longer catch her aura. This made him very anxious, and he hurriedly rushed to the Eastern Palace, afraid that the little fellow would disappear without a word, and that they would not see each other for many years. Why aren't you saying anything? The Crown Princess increased the force in her hand slightly, causing Arbor, who was communicating with Qiuqiu, to come back to his senses. Jojo, you're not allowed to run. He lifted her up and looked her in the eye. Can you not run? Where did I go? Arbor looked at him speechlessly. It was all her fault that her cultivation wasn't high enough. If she could bring him to Paradise Planet to take a look, wouldn't everything be clear at a glance? She ran away. He leaned over and bit her lips. Just now. Let's not run anymore, okay? Running makes me nervous. Next time, if I can't feel your presence, I'll take measures against you, okay? Ah Pui, what measures do you want to take? Arbor struggled in his arms, but failed to break free. She angrily bared her little white teeth and bit him. The Crown Prince, this shameless person, hurriedly adjusted his position and said with a smile, Come, don't bite the wrong place. The two people's four lips met. Chapter 592. Splash. A trickle of water splashed onto Prince Mo's face. Arbor's little finger was encircled by a ring of clear spring water, glistening and flowing back and forth between her fingertips. At this moment, the handsome and otherworldly Crown Prince Mo was looking at her in bewilderment with a head full of water, his long hair dripping wet. This appearance. Arbor couldn't help but snicker, and then burst out laughing. Mo Lien looked at her in a daze for a while, then suddenly hugged her tightly and said excitedly, Jojo, Jojo, you smiled at Jojo. Look at this fool, was it worth it to be so happy just because she smiled? He wanted to grab her and fly up. Arbor reached out a pair of little claws and rubbed his wet face, a faint gentleness flashing through her big eyes. You're wet, go take a bath. Okay, then you should sleep early. Don't worry about the palace banquet tomorrow night, I'll go with you. Prince Mo rubbed the little fellow's forehead. Arbor snorted. I'm not worried at all. It's others who should be worried. If someone is blind enough to provoke me, I'll help you hit them back. Prince Mo immediately agreed without any restraint. Arbor pursed her watery lips, her eyes shining brightly. She poked his chest with a finger. I'll hit them myself. Okay, hit them yourself. My Jojo is so powerful, you definitely won't be at a disadvantage. Prince Mo flicked his sleeves, and the water on his body was dried by an invisible fire. He placed her on the bed, held her little hand and asked, what was that just now? It's the power of the essence water that I fused with. Arbor tilted her little head to look at him. It's just that my cultivation isn't high enough now, so I can only control this much water. Very good. There was a hint of a smile in the Crown Prince's eyes as he rubbed her head. You've yet to break through to the spirit realm, but you already control the most powerful water spirit, the Holy Spirit water that can crush 9th level spirit water. When you break through to the spirit realm, you'll naturally be able to use it with ease. 9th layer spiritual water. Arbor had never heard of it before and was curious. That's right, 9th layer spiritual water. When breaking through to level 15 Great Mystic Cultivator realm, as long as one can comprehend one of the 5 spirits, they can enter the spirit realm. The Crown Prince explained, but normal mystic cultivators can only comprehend the 1st to 5th levels of the 5 spirits. Those who were able to comprehend the 6th level of spirit fire and water were all extraordinarily talented individuals within the spirit realm. You have surpassed the comprehension of the 9th level of spiritual water. I didn't comprehend anything. I can use the power of water after fusing with the essence water. The little fellow's explanation made a certain crown prince's mouth twitch. Yes, yes, yes. My JoJo is amazing. The crown prince laid her down and covered her with the blanket with a grin. He leaned over and gently kissed her forehead. Go to sleep. Where are you sleeping? Arbor suddenly asked. Are you keeping me? The crown prince was startled, and a mischievous smile immediately surfaced on his lips. The bed is quite big, so we can squeeze and sleep together. Pretend I didn't say anything. Darling Xiao pulled the blanket over her little head and shrank inside, wrapping herself into a cocoon. The man chuckled softly and reached over to pull the blanket over her, insisting on pulling her little head out of the blanket. All right, hurry and sleep. Don't suffocate yourself. Be good, okay? Chirp. Receiving a kiss on her little face, the little one muttered and turned her face away. Chapter 593. Sleep well, there's no rush to wake up early. Tomorrow, when I'm done, I'll come back and tell you a big joke. The crown prince narrowed his eyes and smiled. He reached out to tuck the little fellow in before leaving. Until his bamboo-like figure gradually disappeared from the window outside the bedchamber, Arbor continued to stare in a daze. She suddenly shrank her head into the blanket and reached out to touch her slightly hot little face. His words lingered in her heart, and not long after, she poked her head out of the blanket. She was as timid as a small animal in the snowy night, her eyes especially bright in the dark night. There was only one candle lit in the corner of the room, and the faint yellow light spread out. After tossing and turning for a while, she didn't know when she fell asleep. When she opened her eyes, it was already late in the morning. Xiao Yao heard her movements and immediately walked over with a smile. She helped her freshen up and change her clothes with a smile on her face. Little mistress, did you sleep well last night? Not bad. Arbor pursed her lips. She thought that the crown prince must have given her some medicine, otherwise, how could she sleep so soundly later on? That's great. Xiao Yao took out a red dress for her to change into. She said, Her Majesty the Queen is holding a small banquet tonight to see Little Mistress. Little Mistress, you don't have to worry too much. Her Majesty the Queen is an especially forgiving person. Arbor fiddled with the jade beads in her hand and said with a childish attitude, If she doesn't treat me well, I'll ignore her. Xiao Yao almost laughed out loud. She fiddled with her hair. Comb it again tonight. It's still early, so let's leave it like this for now. Does Little Mistress want to eat now? I'm not that hungry. I'll go read for a while. I'll just get some snacks later. It's better to eat some staple food. No need. I'll eat later. Get more food. After eating, I'll go to that whatever palace banquet. The little fellow waved her hand. She hugged the book and ran to the brocade couch by the window to read. Xiao Yao was a bit dumbfounded. After staring blankly for a while, she couldn't help but want to laugh. Little Master wanted to eat his fill so that he could join the battle later. Mo Lien didn't come back until the evening. Arbor saw her, put down his book and ran over. I finished reading all the medical books. You can send them back now. It's snowing outside again. Mo Lien was very wet all the way, so he didn't go forward to hug her. Instead, he prepared to change his clothes. All right, send it back and see if there are any other medical books in the Imperial Physicians Building. Speaking of which, it was really funny. The old doctors of the Imperial Physician Building actually jointly wrote a letter to complain about him in front of his imperial father. The old great king even called the crown prince over and reprimanded him. But in the end, the crown prince still didn't return the book to the imperial physician, so the matter was left unsettled. The little fellow followed closely behind him. Then let's eat. Mo Lien took off his outer robe and changed into a clean one. He reached out to hug her. Are you hungry? Set the table. Yes, Your Highness. Xiao 11Z retreated and gave the order. I'm not that hungry, right? The little fellow had just chewed on a peach. She rubbed her stomach. It's only when I'm full that I have the strength to beat people up. She had a feeling that this banquet was going to be a torturous one. That's why she had to eat her fill in advance so that she wouldn't have to listen to some people's chatter when she was hungry. The Crown Prince thought, what should he do when his wife didn't rely on him at all? Beating people up was so tiring. Did he need his wife to do it? Chapter 594. That's right. I had nothing to do this afternoon, so I roasted 2 fish for you. But it's cold now, so let Xiao Yao heat it up for us to eat. Since he liked to hold her, she was too lazy to walk by herself. The two of them sat on the embroidered couch. Mo Lien turned the little girl's face and looked at her with a smile. Jojo is so capable. Can't do it. Arbor frowned. It doesn't taste good, and it's a bit burnt. You should roast it next time. It was also because these fish were born and bred in Paradise Stars Lake, so it was a pity to waste their rich profound energy. Otherwise, she would have thrown them away. Jojo's cooking is delicious. As she spoke, Xiao Yao smiled and brought people forward to serve the dishes. 2 slightly burnt fish. Mo Lien was a bit surprised when she took the first bite. The profound energy wrapped around the fish was very rich, as if these fish had been raised in some profound realm for a long time. He glanced at her and didn't say anything. Thinking about the peaches that the little girl had taken out earlier, he thought that this little fellow must have had a fortuitous encounter. After the two of them finished eating, Xiao Yao went forward to tidy up Arbor's clothes and hair again. Only then did the two of them leave the door and board the carriage, heading towards the central palace. At this time, the snowflakes were a bit heavy. Arbor reached out a hand to the curtain and watched the snowflakes fall on her palm, sparkling brightly. Her brows moved slightly. She thought of the Spirit Division Records Technique chapter, which recorded a strange technique related to the water spirit. Using water to condense ice, ice to melt snow. Ice as needles, ice as arrows, and snow as fragments of dust. It could harm people invisibly. With her current cultivation, she couldn't use the water spirit's power in a large area. If she could secretly use it in a small area, she would be able to obtain a strange victory in battle. The Crown Prince saw her sitting in the carriage silently staring at the 6-chestnut snowflake in her palm. He couldn't help but raise his brows and whisper a word to the driver. The snow in her palm suddenly melted into a bit of water, and then a small stream of water emerged from her palm. It didn't turn into ice for a long time, and Arbor's forehead condensed a trace of sweat. The carriage quietly walked on the palace road. Without Arbor's knowledge, it took a long detour and slowly headed toward the central palace. Condensing water into ice was easier said than done. It was impossible for her to be born with the ability to change the form of water and easily condense water into ice. Qiuqiu's assistance would always be an assistance. Only when she could control the water manipulation ability would it be her own power. This required her to try again and again to test the waters and put in more effort. Because she had fused the life essence water, she might have a success rate that was more than 10 times higher than others. However, she still needed to constantly try to solidify it. There was nothing that could be easily obtained. The Crown Prince stared at her with a smile on his lips. His Qiao Qiao was truly a person with outstanding innate talent. Even a snowstorm could open the door to enlightenment for her. This kind of comprehension ability was already one of a kind in this world. After an hour, Arbor grasped the essentials. Under her control, a small stream of water condensed into a piece of sparkling ice crystal. In a flash, this piece of ice crystal turned into a 6-chestnut snowflake, flashing in her hand. When she suddenly raised her hand, it suddenly flew out. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The snowflakes cut through several nearby trees. After the carriage moved far away, the trees split from the middle. The upper half of the branches suddenly fell to the ground and split into two pieces. Arbor sighed and turned to meet the Crown Prince's smiling gaze. I just got home. You don't have to wait for me until 11 o'clock. Chapter 595. This kind of control over the water spirit can absolutely be considered as a gift blessed by the heavens. Mo Lien pinched her small face. After all, his little one hadn't even broken through to the spiritual realm. Using the water spirit required spiritual energy as a guide at the very least, right? However, this little one broke all the rules. No level 11 mystic cultivator could use mystic energy to control the water spirit. This wasn't as simple as skipping levels to control it. This little one was definitely an oddball. If she wasn't exceptionally gifted, then what was she? The Crown Prince looked proud as he warmed up the little one's slightly cold hand. Then are we late? Arbor looked up at him when she saw that the sky had already turned completely dark. It's a special situation. I've already sent someone to report to Mother Queen's brilliant Sun Hall, the Crown Prince said with a smile. Then will your mother think that I was late on purpose? Although the little one looked aloof on the outside and didn't say many things, she was actually an especially soft and meticulous person. Sometimes, she thought a lot, but she wouldn't say it all out loud. Her intuition toward people was also especially sharp. She could almost instantly determine who was good to her and who was hostile to her. Mo Lien could already sense her slight uneasiness, so she quickly held her small hand and rubbed it. Mother Queen is a very magnanimous person, so don't be nervous. Besides, I'll always be by your side no matter what happens. We'll always stand together. I'm not nervous, Arbor said with a stoic face. If your mother doesn't treat me well, I won't talk to her. Prince Mo looked at this darling, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Alright, then I won't talk to her either. Let's both ignore her. Mo Lien nodded solemnly. Xiao, 11Z and the other eunuchs and royal maids accompanying them almost staggered and knelt on the ground. Oh my, their Lord Crown Prince was originally a very willful and reckless person. Now, great, the Crown Princess seemed to be 100 times more willful than their lord. What were they going to do in the future? Wouldn't their days be abnormally lively? Xiao Mu turned to look at him and harumphed, non-committally disagreeing with his words. The carriage did not take any more detours and quickly stopped at the entrance of the middle palace. The two of them got out of the carriage and didn't use the palanquin. Instead, they held hands and slowly walked through the snow. Xiao, 11Z quickly opened up an umbrella and called for the palace maids on the side to hastily hold umbrellas for their two willful masters. Along the way, the roofs and trees on both sides of the road were already covered in a thin layer of snow white. If this snow continued for the whole night, it would definitely accumulate again tomorrow. Inside the brilliant Sun Hall where the Queen was holding a banquet. A group of noble ladies with titles and daughters-in-law from aristocratic families were already seated, waiting for the banquet to begin. The Queen was dressed in a golden and red robe with layers of clouds embroidered on the hem. She sat upright on the seat of honor, drinking tea leisurely from beginning to end, not saying a word. There were only a few whispers below, and no one dared to say anything. Until the announcement of Consort Zheng's arrival broke the apparent tranquility of the palace. All of the noble ladies with titles and daughters-in-law from aristocratic families stood up and bowed, saying in unison, "Greetings to Consort Zheng." Her Highness Consort Zheng, who had a slender waist and a voluptuous and tall figure, was dressed in a long red dress with rippling ripples. She wore a gorgeous hairpin with 8 treasures and pearls in her hair. With the help of the palace maids, she gracefully swayed her way to the first seat below the seat of honor. The top-grade pearls hanging next to her cheeks clanked as they bumped against each other as she walked. Chapter 596. Her red lips were slightly curved, and her figure was graceful. Although she was in her early 20s, she was dressed as pretty as a 15 or 16-year-old girl, so she didn't look too out of place. All the concubines and princesses also stood up to greet her. In front of Consort Zheng, other than Her Majesty the Queen, who didn't need to worry about Consort Zheng due to her precious and noble status, no one else dared to be careless. Dispense with the formalities. Consort Zheng reached out to touch the jade tassel pendant that had been scraped to the side of her face, a frivolous smile hanging on her lips. She unhurriedly curtsied to Her Majesty the Queen, who was sitting at the head of the table. "Greetings, Your Majesty the Queen." Queen Zhao glanced at her indifferently and nodded. Consort Zheng's but was just about to sit down on the first seat below the head of the table when Queen Zhao irreverently curled her lips and coldly said, "Younger sister Zheng, you're sitting in the wrong seat. That's where the crown princess is sitting." Consort Zheng's smile immediately froze on her pretty face. Cough. One of the two middle-aged concubines sitting below the head of the table choked on her tea and coughed out a laugh. Both of them were in their 40s and had maintained themselves well. Although they couldn't be considered young and beautiful, they still retained their charm. One of them was Consort Zheng, the mother of the great king's son Mo Jiao, and the other was Lu Fei, the mother of the second prince Mo Lu. The one who coughed out a laugh was Her Highness Consort Zheng, and Consort Zheng was currently glaring at her fiercely. The latter pretended to wipe her mouth with a handkerchief and didn't say anything, but the smile on her lips couldn't be wiped away. "Older sister Zheng, come sit here." A royal concubine in her 20s gently pointed at the seat in front of Consort Zheng as she spoke to noble Consort Zheng with a grin. Consort Zheng then glared at her fiercely and sneered, "Your Majesty the Queen, this daughter-in-law who was suddenly betrothed is really putting on airs. What time is it now? Why aren't they here yet?" Just as she finished speaking, a eunuch outside the brilliant Sun Hall reported, "The Crown Prince and the Crown Princess have arrived." The group of noble ladies and aristocratic families immediately revealed expectant gazes as they eagerly turned their heads to look at the open door outside the hall. Consort Zheng immediately lost her composure. She straightened her back and glared at the seat under her butt. If her gaze could split the seat, she would have done it long ago. That damned old hag. Why didn't she say that this was the crown princess seat earlier? Why did she have to wait until she was sitting down? How embarrassing. Consort Zheng stood in front of the seat. She felt that it would be too embarrassing to walk away now, so she didn't sit down. Instead, she looked coldly at the couple entering the hall hand in hand. Who knew how many people's gazes they had attracted on their way here? The crown prince and the crown princess were dressed in red as they walked in hand, looking very eye-catching. The man was tall and slender, handsome like an exquisite piece of jade, while the girl was icy and beautiful like the cold moon. No one could find a single flaw in their appearances, so much so that everyone couldn't help but think the same thing in their minds when they saw this scene. A match made in heaven. Mu Qianqian felt like she was sitting on pins and needles, as if there were 17 to 18 needles poking her under her butt. She shifted her body uneasily, and her malicious eyes glared straight at the red-clothed little lady who was walking past her. So hateful. Was it her? The lowly lass who suddenly appeared out of nowhere and stole her crown princess position. Mu Qianqian completely didn't recognize that she had seen Arbor in the Qin estate before. At that time, Arbor was still in disguise, so her current appearance was naturally worlds apart. Chapter 597. Abruptly, Arbor turned his head, and his icy eyes apathetically shot a vicious glance at Mu Qianqian. That glance made one's heart tremble with fear, as if it could kill a person on the spot with a single glance. That was a ruthless attack that our dear Xiao Mu had used her spiritual conscience to directly infiltrate the other party's conscience. Was this darling someone that any Tom, Dick, or Harry could stare at? Mu Qianqian immediately felt her mind go blank, and a piercing pain assaulted her brain. With a shriek, she fell backward. The people sitting behind her were precisely the second branch's mother and daughter, Madame Nei Lu and Mu Jilan. Caught off guard, Mu Qianqian knocked over the entire small table, and all the soup and water spilled onto them. The second branch's mother and daughter immediately shrieked and jumped up, attracting Her Majesty the Queen's stern gaze from the head seat. The young misses nearby all covered their mouths and chuckled as they looked disdainfully at the Mu family's mother and daughter who were jumping up and down. Madame Nei Lu's heart jolted, and she hastily pulled her daughter Mu Jilan forward to kneel. "This commoner and my daughter have been disrespectful in front of Your Majesty the Queen. It's truly because eldest miss suddenly attacked, and this commoner and my daughter were caught off guard." Mu Qianqian also hastily knelt forward and cried pitifully, "Your Majesty is wise. Just now, when she passed by Qianqian, she used some kind of witchcraft to glare fiercely at Qianqian, which caused me to suddenly lose my balance and fall backward." As she spoke, Mu Qianqian raised her sleeve to point at Arbor's back. "Slap her." The Crown Prince abruptly turned around and shouted sternly. Mu Qianqian's eyes bulged in shock as she dumbfoundedly looked at His Highness the Crown Prince, who had suddenly turned hostile and merciless. Just as an indoctrination nanny was about to step forward and press down on Mu Qianqian with a wooden plank, Mu Qianqian wailed, "Your Majesty the Queen, Your Majesty the Queen, Qianqian doesn't know what she did wrong to anger His Highness the Crown Prince. Is the Crown Princess someone a wicked commoner like you can casually point fingers at? What her? Who is she?" The Crown Prince glared at the indoctrination nanny who had stopped and said ruthlessly, "Don't you know how to hit her? Do you want us to do it personally? Double it." The indoctrinating nanny's heart shuddered, and she promptly slapped Mu Qianqian's mouth with the paddle. After 3 hits, Mu Qianqian's originally glossy and seductive red lips broke, and tears streamed down her face like beads from a broken necklace. When Queen Zhao saw this, she couldn't bear it anymore. The Queen previously had 3 or 4 Crown Princess and secondary consort candidates that she favored, and one of them was this Mu Qianqian. Although Mu Qianqian's father wasn't an official in the imperial court, he was the family head of one of the capital's 8 great patrician families, the Talisman patrician family. Moreover, it was said that this Talisman aristocratic family was a branch family of a Talisman aristocratic family in the Divine Prefecture. Their influence was absolutely not to be underestimated. That was the mysterious divine land that was praised by tens of thousands of people. Compared to the Shuntian manor behind Consortcheng, it was naturally one level higher. If the Crown Prince were to marry the daughter of such an aristocratic family, it would definitely be of great help to him. The other few were also daughters of high-ranking officials or daughters of aristocratic families. Their looks and knowledge were all very good, so they were more than qualified to be secondary consorts. However, she didn't expect that father and son pair to pull off such a stunt and casually settle on the Crown Princess candidate. At this time, the Queen was currently sizing up this Crown Princess. She saw that she was only 14 or 15 years old, but her small face was glistening, snow-white, and jade-like. However, what was up with that expressionless small face? "I'm done for today. I'll try my best to add more chapters tomorrow. I've always been writing 6 chapters a day. Older sister, I had to take 3 days of leave to write the first 10 chapters. How could I take leave every day? Wouldn't I get hacked by my boss? Other than writing chapters in my spare time, I basically don't leave the house at all. Of course, I'm already cut off from TV and games. I've already done my best. I don't even have time to save chapters when the editor told me to, ow." Chapter 598. Greetings to Royal Mother. Prince Mo walked up while holding Jojo's small hand and curtsied to his mother. After witnessing the Crown Prince's severe punishment of Mu Qianqian, the group of royal concubines, madams, and noble ladies all tacitly understood that the Crown Prince attached great importance to this consort. No one would continue to idiotically provoke this crown princess's dignity in front of the crown prince. Therefore, they all obediently curtsied to the crown prince and crown princess. Our dear Xiao Lin, who was at the back of the crowd, couldn't help but twist her small body in excitement. Her mother, Wei Ziqin, patted her small hand lightly and shot her a warning glance before she finally settled down. Wei Ziqin had arrived early with her daughter, but her eldest daughter didn't show up even after waiting for a long time. Now that she saw the crown prince personally escorting her eldest daughter over and even defending her in front of others, she couldn't help but be extremely delighted. She liked this son-in-law no matter how she looked at him. Queen Zhao was a protective mother, so she naturally wouldn't embarrass her son in front of everyone. Even if she disapproved of our dear Xiao Lin's stoic face, she naturally wouldn't show it on the surface. She had them dispense with the formalities with a chuckle and secretly cast a glance at her son. Truly, her son had grown up and she couldn't do as she wished. Could it be that she would eat the crown princess up? She even specially sent the crown princess over. She couldn't see how this little lady was worthy of her peerlessly outstanding son. She could tell at a glance that this young lady had an icy temperament. Her small face didn't even have the slightest hint of a smile when facing the elders. Heaven knew how much her son would suffer from chasing after her. When she thought of how such a good son would suffer grievances in front of a young lady, Queen Zhao didn't feel good about it. In Queen Zhao's opinion, her son was the best in the world. When young ladies saw him, they should be like Mu Qianshan and the likes, swarming over like bees. How could they be like darling Xiao, indifferent and expressionless all day long? Our dear Xiao Lin keenly detected a trace of dissatisfaction coming from the queen's direction, and she looked up with a frown at the queen with sparkling eyes. What the heck? You actually dare to frown at me? Queen Zhao kept complaining in her heart, but she didn't show it on her face. Alright, leave your crown princess behind. The queen grumbled in annoyance and glanced at the crown prince. The crown prince nodded with a smile. Then this subject will come back in 2 hours to bring the crown princess back. Queen Zhao wished she could send the crown prince flying with a smack of the back of his head. Her expression was simply brilliant. The expressions of the other concubines and noble ladies were also quite interesting. Could these women eat the crown princess or something? Wasn't it just a small banquet in the palace? The crown prince was still worried about sending her back and forth. She was really a delicate girl. It looked very worrisome. Queen Zhao was thunderstruck by the stoic face again. The stoic face was expressionless from beginning to end. When she heard the crown prince say he was going to pick her up, she took it as a matter of course. Just as everyone was madly ridiculing her in their hearts, they saw the little stoic turn around and say to the crown prince, "How about an hour, I'm sleepy." The crown prince nodded happily and patted the little fellow's head. Okay. Queen Zhao and all the concubines were flabbergasted. Consort Zheng couldn't resist laughing out loud and mocking, the crown princess really is delicate beyond belief. You just came to attend the banquet and want to leave immediately. TSK, where are you putting Her Majesty the Queen's face, he. The little stoic turned to look at Consort Zheng and creased her brows. You are the Queen. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.